Paula Reis to the position of Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sincerely, Charles Baker, Governor. Good morning, Ms. Reis. At this time, I know you have a lot of distinguished folks here, but we're going to hear from the Honorable David Frank, the First Justice of the Cambridge District Court. Judge, if you want to say a few words.
Thank you. Where do you?
You can stand right in the middle.
Okay. Right here?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Right there, Scott. I'm here in the meeting, Counselor. I don't know if you remember. Right there.
All right, well, thank you.
Excuse me, Counselor. Excuse me.
Thank you very much. My name is Judge David Frank. I am the First Justice of Cambridge District Court. I've been a judge since 2014. It's an honor to appear before this council today to talk about Erika Reis. I have known Erika since about 2007, thereabouts, or might have even been, about 2007 when she started working in the DA's office. I was a bar advocate at the time. I worked in Suffolk County. I did a lot of criminal defense work in that court with the Suffolk County DA's office. I had the pleasure of having many, many cases where Ms. Reis was opposing counsel. She was representing the government, ranging from misdemeanors all the way up to life felonies. So I really had an extensive opportunity to work with Erika and handle some difficult, challenging cases with her. And if I had to sort of think about words to describe Erika and why I think she would be a fantastic judge if she were fortunate enough to be nominated, words like fair, honest, smart, prepared, responsive. When you're doing defense work, when you're working by yourself and you're just trying to get the work done, it's incredibly helpful when you make a call and you get a call back. And even if it's a tough conversation, even if it's something where the other side's going to say something that you maybe don't want to hear, Erika Reis would pick up the phone or take a couple minutes and talk out in the hallway and give me the answer. And that's all you want. And I have to say, whenever I found out that Erika was on the other side of a case, I would tell the client, she's good, she's smart, she's fair, she's going to hear us out. And I think those are incredibly important qualities as a lawyer, and they're incredibly important qualities as a judge in the BMC and the district court and throughout the trial courts. Giving people a chance to be heard, giving people an opportunity to have their day, whether you're going to rule in their favor or rule against them. I think the opportunity to be heard is really important. Erika, that's something that just stands out to me from our years working together. And if she is fortunate to get the votes from this council, I think she's going to be a great judge. She's got demeanor, she's got it all, and I'm happy to be here, honored to be here to speak on her behalf.
Thank you very much. Councilor Kennedy.
Good to see you, Judge. You're doing a great job in Cambridge. Don't tell anybody I said that.
Our secret.
Thank you very much. Councilor Devaney.
So nice to see you.
Counselor, nice to see you too.
Been a long time since you got 8 years.
8 years as a judge.
Well,
Still loving it.
well, I'm hearing all good things about you, and I'm personally glad that you got to Cambridge. I really am. That makes it a lot better for you. So tell me, is there any case that comes to mind about the nominee that you were so impressed out of all of the cases that you've seen?
Yeah, so I have to say, I was trying to think of specific cases that I had with Erika, and there were a lot, ranging from, arraignment all the way to trial. She probably doesn't even remember it because it was so long ago. I do remember having a trial with her, and the defendant was accused. It was a charge of drug distribution, and it went to trial. And I remember it went on for a couple of days, and there were just a lot of issues. And I bet you she doesn't remember it, but there were issues with relative to whether witnesses had Fifth Amendment privileges, whether certain evidence could come in. And it's one of those cases when you finish it, you're like, wow, we just tackled 4 or 5 pretty challenging, complicated issues. And I was the adversary. We're on opposite sides of the aisle, and I was just incredibly impressed with the way she handled all of them. Some of them, she's just learning about them as they're coming because they're trial issues. And I remember just being impressed with Erika when that was happening. And, to the point when I saw that she got nominated, I, immediately started thinking about why somebody, if they get the votes, will be so great. And a case like that sort of comes to mind. So I hope that answers your question.
No, thank you. And your testimony means a lot to me. So good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You're doing a great job. Good to see you,
Thank
Judge.
you, Counselor. Appreciate it.
Next, we'll hear from Susan Weiss, First Assistant Corporation Counsel, City of Boston. You can stand or sit, but your choice.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. Yes.
Good morning, members of the council. My name is Susan Weiss. I'm the First Assistant Corporation Counsel for the City of Boston Law Department. It is an honor and a privilege for me to have this opportunity to testify in support of my former colleague, Erika Reis's nomination to be an Associate Justice for the Boston Municipal Court. I enthusiastically and proudly recommend Erika without any reservation for this position. She's simply one of the best qualified candidates for the position, considering both her experience as an assistant district attorney and as a senior assistant corporation counsel, making her well-versed in both criminal and civil law and procedure. She also had the experience of working for a year for a utility, so she has seen and worked on a wide variety of legal issues. Erika worked for me as her direct supervisor for almost 9 years, doing civil litigation starting with simple auto collision and personal injury cases to more complicated police misconduct, civil rights, and employment cases in both Superior and Federal District Court. By the time Erika had left us this past January to return to the DA's office, Erika was responsible for and handling some of the most substantive cases in our office. She tried cases in Superior Court and the Federal District Court to completion with full responsibility for all her cases. Erika not only researches and writes well, she is a natural in the courtroom. She is appropriately confident and comfortable examining witnesses, as well as arguing the law to the court. She never lets pressure upset her. She marches through the issues, always looking for resolutions. She's very practical, though, in her approach to the law, her thoughts and recommendations, knowing when it's time to litigate and when it's time to maybe perhaps settle with an appropriate, reasonable range of settlement authority. She was one of my go-to attorneys in the law department. She was always available to give me a sanity check about cases, whether I asked for it or not, and that carried over into life in the law department at City Hall. We miss her ideas and her guidance very much, but know that the litigants and parties that may come before her and hopefully her new role in life will be well served. Erika has a ton of personality. She's not afraid to speak her mind and make sure that all are treated with respect. She has a lot of patience and will have a good judicial temperament. She will be a perfect fit for the district court. It's where she wants to be, where she feels she can affect people's lives for the better on a personal level. She practiced in the district court as an ADA, so she's very familiar with the practice of law in this court and will be comfortable with the range of cases that she has to navigate. She will get the job done. She's tenacious and honest. She was also always available to discuss whatever needed to be discussed, which I found invaluable, whether it was weekends or at nights. In that regard, I think she will also be a good, solid colleague to her fellow judges. First, obviously, learning from them, and then somewhere down the road, being a mentor to the new judges that come after her. And that's an invaluable asset in any institution. She was also involved in different bar organizations and was president of the Mass chapter of the Federal Bar Association for a year. And she has also been involved in domestic abuse hotlines for a very long time, giving up her time on weekends to find assistance for those so affected by this problem. I am again very proud to testify on her behalf and to support her nominations. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Councilor Devaney.
Thank you for coming. So you were her boss for 9 years,
Yes.
right? Is there any attribute that comes to mind out of all the things you said, that she's honest and all the other things, that comes to mind that this particular attribute will be such an asset on the bench?
She's not afraid to get involved. If she sees a problem, she's not afraid to get involved with the problem, suggest ideas on how to resolve it. And she doesn't need to be asked. She will volunteer for doing different tasks, whether it was helping out the law department in administrative areas or in legal areas. So in that regard, she's always ready and willing to jump into any issue that arises.
Your testimony means a lot. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That will exhaust the people who will speaking on your behalf. Is there anyone here who wants to speak in opposition? There being no one here in opposition, that will exhaust that portion of the hearing. I know you have some distinguished folks, like I said, and before we hear from you, if you want to introduce any folks that are here, now's the time.
Sure. So just my parents should be arriving momentarily, so I will go ahead and introduce them. Several of my colleagues, both current at the DA's office as well as former colleagues at the law department are here. Some of my best friends are here as well, and someone that I think probably doesn't need any introduction, former Boston Police Commissioner Willie Gross, who is also a dear friend.
Okay, and there's another gentleman over here. What's his name? Is it Leiden? Is it Leiden?
So,
Very good. Good to see you.
Recognize me with the haircut.
Yeah, good to see you. He spoke I saw him actually on the street about a week or 2 or 3 ago. Pulled me aside. You better, da. Was a strong supporter. Yeah, good to see you again. At this point, we'll hear from you.
thank you. I just want to take a moment. I know many of us are here today with heavy hearts, given the horrific events that occurred yesterday in an elementary school in Texas. And given those events, I really appreciate everyone's time and attention this morning. I want to thank the Governor's Council for this tremendous opportunity to be before you today. Thank you to Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for nominating me for a position as an Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court. Thank you to Bob Ross, Lauren Green Petrigno, and her entire team for helping me navigate through this process. I want to thank the JNC, the Joint Bar Council, and Valerie, as well as her staff, for all their work. I certainly would not be sitting here today without the unwavering support and love from my parents, both of whom I'm sure you all will meet momentarily, and are 86 and 93. So I certainly have a lot to look up to with those two. And I will never be able to express to them how grateful I am to be their daughter. To my family and friends and colleagues, some of whom are here today and some of whom are watching, thank you for all of your support and encouragement throughout the years. I will ask the council to briefly indulge me. As some of you know, I am Cape Verdean, and I want to take a moment to thank the Cape Verdean community. Para a comunidade cabo-verdiana, obrigada por todo o apoio e amizade durante minha vida, e com grande orgulho que estou sentado ali como crioula, em que eu sei, mas nunca esqueci a minha crioula. Amelia Boynton Robinson once said, "You never know where you're going unless you know where you've been." As I sit here and ask you to appoint me as an Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court, where I began my legal career, I want to tell you a little bit about where I've been and why I'm asking for your vote. I'll start by telling you that my parents were both born in Cape Verde, and for those who don't know, Cape Verde are 10 small islands, small but mighty islands off the west coast of Africa. Life took them both to Portugal, where they met and got married. My mom immigrated to the United States in the early 70s, and for the first few years of my parents' marriage, they lived on different continents. But in 1977, the newly formed Cape Verdean government asked my father if he would be the first general counsel to Cape Verde in Boston, to which he agreed. And that's how I ended up being born here in the United States. When I was 7 years old, my parents and I moved back to Cape Verde, as I talk about in my application. And as I reflect on my life's journey, this move marks a milestone and is the most important gift my parents could have ever given me, which without a doubt had an enormous impact on the trajectory that has led me here today. I'm very grateful that at a young age I was exposed to people from different walks of life with very different experiences than my own, yet we all lived in community together. I'm incredibly grateful for the values my parents instilled in me: hard work, kindness, integrity, and respect for everyone. They also taught me the power of service to others, and that it was my responsibility to pay it forward, and I'll forever be grateful to them. In my early 20s, I worked with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault in a shelter. I'll never forget arriving at a shelter shift early one Saturday morning and learning that an abuser, an Army-trained sniper whose family had relocated from Ohio to Massachusetts just to escape him, had tracked the family down through one of the son's prescription refills. Within an hour, a coworker and I were driving to a different state to relocate the family. We were terrified for their safety as well as our own, and not feeling comfortable that this family would ever be safe again, no matter how many times they relocate. Working with families in crisis, being responsible for the safety of strangers is humbling, but it's also guided my work with victims over the years, including as a prosecutor. I became a prosecutor because I believe that that's where I could be the most impactful within the criminal justice system, particularly in the lives of young people. I started in the Dorchester Division of the Boston Municipal Court, where in addition to my full adult caseload, I also staffed the juvenile session. In the juvenile court, back then, we were using tools like diversion, restorative justice, and alternatives in sentencing, which are now becoming more common in the district court. I appreciate how far we've come, but I also think we have much more we can do. Those experiences have informed my beliefs. After leaving the Suffolk County DA's office, to which I recently returned to, I spent most of my career as a civil defense attorney. A large part of my practice involved defending law enforcement officials accused of using excessive force. Many of these cases originate out of the district court. This required spending time not only reviewing district court dockets, but also analyzing the constitutionality of my client's actions in the underlying criminal case. I believe that the criminal justice system must exemplify an institution where everyone feels seen and heard, including defendants and victims. Where the color of your skin or where you were born doesn't determine your worth in our society. That anyone, no matter what obstacles, challenges, or choices they have made, can become a productive member of our society. Judges play a critical role in this process, especially judges in the district courts where so many lives are impacted on a daily basis. That's what being part of a community means to me. I appreciate that I'm not the most conventional candidate for a district court position, but I believe that I'm the right candidate for this position. I'm confident that my professional, but more importantly, my personal background has prepared me for this enormous responsibility, and strongly believe that the work that's done in the district court has some of the most significant consequences in a person's life. I applied for this position because I believe that my community deserves judges that reflect diversity of experiences and perspectives. Both through my legal practice and my non-legal work, I believe that I would bring a very different perspective to the bench if appointed. If appointed, I will strive to ensure that everyone who comes before me understands that their worst day does not define them or what they can offer our community. I believe that judges can balance holding defendants accountable for their actions without compromising public safety, that victims must always have a voice in the process, and that this can be done fairly with kindness, compassion, and respect to all parties. I've spent my entire career serving the people of Boston, the city I call home. I sit before you and humbly ask for your vote as an Associate Justice of the Boston Municipal Court to continue that service. Thank you, and I welcome any questions the council may have.
Thank you very much. Councilor Terry Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You certainly have a very diverse background, which is something we don't always see. People who've done both criminal work and civil litigation, and I think that's a huge plus for you. I've just been looking over your resume a little bit, and you were at the City of Boston for a total of 8.5 years, is that right?
Yes,
You left for a year.
I did.
What was that about?
Quite frankly, it was at the time the city of Boston, I was given an opportunity to Eversource, a financial one that the city couldn't match. So I went to Eversource.
I'm just wondering why you left the money.
Oh, to come back to the city?
Yeah.
Susan Weiss certainly persuaded me, but I actually missed, Eversource was great, but I missed working in public service. Working for the city of Boston, you certainly, while we all have a job to do in our respective roles, you recognize that you're working for the people at the end of the day. I mentioned it in my statement. I love this city. So I definitely, there was more of a personal connection coming back to the city.
Why did you leave to go to the Suffolk DA's office in January? You've only been there 5 months, right? You haven't even there.
Yes.
You're not going to leave this job.
I'm not.
Are you?
I'm not. No, I'm not. Yet I was asked to come back and help with the transition. I certainly thought that it was a good opportunity to, with my skill set, to come back and help, and it's been a great opportunity.
Well, I had a chance to talk to you on the phone and your whole background, and I appreciate your time with that. I think you're a home run. I can tell you that Councilor Iannella thought you were a home run as soon as your nomination came up. He saw BC on it. That was enough, but he was.
You saw BC as well.
I know. But if it's Barton Last or BC, that's it. It's over. You sold. But no, he's a big fan. Absolutely was all over it as soon as he saw your nomination. So I'm going to be delighted to vote for you.
Thank you. Councilor DePaula.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Councilor DePaulo.
I enjoyed the conversation we were able to have ahead of the hearing. I do have a couple questions for you.
In your application, when you talked about exercising discretion as a judge, you wrote that judges should be able to exercise discretion to think outside the box. And I'm wondering, what does that look like to you? What are outcomes that are outside the box?
I think that sort of comes to mind immediately is in terms of sentencing. I think I mentioned this in one of the writings. I think it's important to think about rehabilitation and what that looks like. And sort of going back to what I talked about in juvenile court, some of the programs and whether it's diversion or restorative justice, some of those initiatives and concepts, I think that is something that comes to mind. I know it's difficult because we have some ideas in terms of how, what sentencing should look like, and asking judges to sort of go against that grain sometimes can be difficult, but I do think about what sentencing could look like if we're thinking about using some of these more progressive concepts.
And if we think about information about the defendants, whether contextual or mitigating or in any event, how do you, because you've worked in juvenile courts, so you know that especially juveniles and young adults may approach with a distrust of the process that they're in, including their own court-appointed attorneys. And so sometimes it's difficult to get all the information that as a judge you might use in considering outcomes. And given the pace of the courthouse, how would you ensure that you are getting all the information that you would need to make a fully informed decision?
I think it's about asking the right questions. I mean, I certainly appreciate that, in busy courthouses, and, this is no fault necessarily to defense attorneys, they may not have time to ask their clients all of the questions that a judge may want answered. So I think, asking the defense attorney certain questions, hopefully that they've gathered, but also as a judge, getting to the right questions. And obviously, if the attorneys need time to find out that information, I certainly would be willing to do that, but I think it's really about asking the right questions. And candidly, I do want to know as much as I can about the whole person, not just the person who is accused of the crime before me. I want to know more about who that person is and what sort of factors may have led them to be before me.
So would it be safe to say then that in spite of the time restrictions on you and pressures, that this is something you'd prioritize?
I would prioritize that, and I would expect that over time, Lauren's going to bring them in. I would get better at it.
And develop a system, so to speak, a checklist, so to speak, that
Yes.
you want to touch on. So you've worked with survivors of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And you probably know that an overwhelming majority, and I don't have the number in front of me, so I don't want to say it, but it's a very high number of the women we have incarcerated in Massachusetts are survivors of domestic abuse or sexual abuse, or oftentimes both. When you're thinking about information presented about a person who's before you, a party before you, is that an example of something that would factor into your decision-making? And what kind of thought process could you go through in evaluating that context?
Meaning, if the defendant has had trauma in any.
Sure, and I guess what I'm asking is, how trauma-informed you are, which I presume you are, based on your experience and our conversation, but could you say just how that manifests itself as a potential judge?
As a potential, sorry, I missed.
Judge, as a potential judge.
So I definitely think that, excuse me. I definitely think that it's important to meet people where they're at. I think trauma, a lot of the folks, particularly that we may be encountering in the district court, in other courts, obviously, there's a lot of other factors, including, as you mentioned, that I think the numbers are actually very high, that incarcerated women, mostly women, are survivors of domestic violence, and certainly would be sensitive to that and take that absolutely into consideration, because I think it tells you more about the bigger picture and the story behind the person. And certainly, not that it's a reason or an excuse for happen, but I definitely think it's important to know that, because, and frankly, I think it may be relevant with respect to sentencing, because some of those not to go too far down this, but in terms of survivors of domestic violence, sometimes they may not necessarily put themselves in a situation to get certain services, but the court does have that opportunity, and
Right.
that could play a factor in sentencing.
And in folks who are engaging in what some might call predictable behavior that lands them in court after experiencing trauma in the past, oftentimes incarceration won't really deter anything in the future. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
I really enjoyed our conversation. I think you have a diverse background as far as the places you've worked and the areas of law you've practiced in. So I look forward to supporting you when your meeting comes up next
Thank you,
week.
Councilor DeFello.
Thank you very much. Before we continue,
Yes.
could be wrong, but I just have that feeling that some special people came into the chamber. And if I'm correct, any way you could do us a favor and introduce these people?
Sure can. This is my dad, my mom. And then my partner and my niece are sitting behind you.
Oh, thank you. Good to see you, folks. Good to see you. She's doing a great job so far. She's doing a great job. Next, we'll hear to my right, Councilor Robert Juvenile.
Mr. Chairman, what did you say? So far, she was doing okay?
So far, oh, yeah.
So what do you think our job here is?
Your job is to ensure that the people who are empathetic, who understand the law, who have common sense, are making decisions with the wards of our Commonwealth.
So what did we do, though? What is our function here, do you know?
To appoint or to vet people. You're sort of the last stop before can get.
So the way it works is the governor nominates you, but he can't appoint you. We do the appointing, right?
Yes,
We do the hiring, right?
it's true.
So unless I missed something, when you said in your statement you thanked a whole bunch of people, did I miss it? Did you thank the governor's council?
You were the first people I thanked.
Oh, good. And when you get this job and you retire, I hope I'm still going to be around, and I'm going to go to your retirement party.
Fair enough. I look forward to seeing you there.
And I hear retirement party judges go on about thanking this woman. They forget the people who hired them. So I know you won't do
We will
it.
not make that mistake.
Did you read the study that Chief Justice Gantz commissioned out of Harvard?
I did.
Racism in our court system. What'd you think of that?
I wasn't surprised by the findings. I wish I could tell you that I was, but I wasn't. I think it was long overdue. I certainly think that and I hear it referenced a lot since it's come out, which I think is a good thing, but I think it certainly highlighted the disparities that, like I said, I think some of us knew were there. And I think it has, at least I hope it has, forced folks to confront some uncomfortable realities of our criminal justice system, even here in Massachusetts. And so I would hope that at least the conversations are happening. I can't sit here and tell you that I know that on the ground, some of the practicalities of that study are actually happening. I hope so. I know that not all of the focus, but a lot of the focus, at least with respect to charging decisions and sentencing disparities, focused mostly on the Superior Court, but certainly in the District Court, I don't think we can sort of think that we are absolved of that, because I think we need to make sure we keep our eye on the ball and ensure that, there's still a lot of areas that we can do better, and we have to, so.
Well, it came down in the end, they said, after explaining the disparities in minorities incarcerated, charged higher than whites, and indicted more per population proportion. It came down to one word. So my thoughts are it's been racism since 1780 when it started, and it's baked pretty deep into our judicial system. I got to tell you, I don't see a lot has changed since that report came out. I know there's been a lot of talk about it, but I don't think think the charging by DAs has changed. And I don't think incarceration by judges have changed much. Do you see that?
I mean, I have not been in the trenches, so to speak, recently. I'm not surprised by that. I think I would hope, and certainly if I have anything to do with it, I would hope that we are having those uncomfortable conversations, are checking our implicit biases, and are doing something about it. And certainly, you know, I'm only one person, but I can assure you that that is something that I will be thinking about at all times.
Have you, in your career in the DA's office, in the court system, ever felt that somebody that was sitting on the bench was racist?
Yes.
So you're going to be a judge. If you see that occur when you're a judge, what are you going to do about that? Kind of a tough situation to be
It's a
in.
tough situation, but I would hope, and I certainly, the responsibility that I think you all are giving me is to ensure that if I see something like that, I do something about it. And luckily, as the judge, I am the person who can do something about it. I can tell you in my own, even in my own practice, I've had to have those uncomfortable conversations with people. They're tough, but you have to, I mean, I don't think there's anything, at least for me, I would have to call it out, essentially. And, you know, particularly when we think about the people who they look like who are in court, I think my responsibility as a judge of color is more than just being on a bench and having a robe. It's more than just having this person before me accused of a crime. That person, and I think I talked about this extensively both this morning and in my application, is part of my community. And as that, I take that responsibility beyond the bench. So I would definitely have something to say if I felt like there was racism happening in my court.
Well, the good thing about being a judge is you can make waves about it, and they can't fire you.
That's right.
But you're going to take a job which I consider to be one of the most powerful jobs in our state government, the power to take liberty away from people. No one else can do that except judges. So when we look at the amount of people incarcerated that are much greater portion to the population than whites, they got there because judges put them there. Do you know anything about the school zone law, the drug school zone?
I know that it recently changed. Well, I don't know how recently, but I know it has changed. I know that when I was practicing, pretty much everywhere in the city of Boston fell within a school zone. And the legislature has taken steps to address those issues. And it's more at 300 school zone and 100 feet of a park, I believe. And I know that obviously Black and brown, particularly young men, have been put in jail based on some of the laws that we've had in the Commonwealth and obviously nationally.
There were judges in the BMC system that would refuse to sentence anybody to that
School zone.
charge. They would find them not guilty of that charge. Because there probably isn't anywhere you could go in the city of Boston, even with the 300 feet, if you're not somewhere around a school or a park or something that applies to that statute. So I know you're intending to be fair to the citizens that come before you, right? So somebody's come before you when they're charged with a school zone violation, and you know it's not fair. You know that a conviction, this particular case before you, isn't fair. It's a mandatory sentence. So what are you going to do?
I wouldn't sentence them on that charge. I would.
Excuse me, can you speak up a little?
Sorry, I would not sentence them on that charge.
I'm voting for you right now. There was a judge, there is a judge still sitting, but she was out at Worcester. short little lady. We weighed about 100 pounds.
Should be
It was
here.
a 10-year minimum mandatory. She said, this is not fair to do this. She sentenced him to 2 years in the House of Correction. Of course, it got overturned, but she made a statement. Of course, she can't get fired, so if more judges made those statements, the legislature down the hall might change that law. Because it's been one of the most abused laws, I think, that's ever been on the books. So I like your answer a great deal. So tell me, what do you think a judge does? What's the purpose of having a judge?
I think the judge is a gatekeeper, both, and obviously their role is to take the law, listen to the facts and the evidence, and apply the law, but I think you also have to ensure that you're applying common sense. Obviously, judges sentence people, they do bails, but ultimately, it is the judge's responsibility to hear the evidence and apply the law.
Well, a lot of people come here and they say the job of a judge is to follow the law. You agree with that?
I think yes, to some extent. I think that for many of us who are lawyers, we know that we sometimes get creative and sometimes there's multiple answers to how you interpret the law. But I do think that the judge's role is, I mean, some of the laws on the books are pretty straightforward and judges don't have a ton of discretion, but there are others where there is more opportunity to exercise discretion. And I think that in those instances in particular, judges should be taking other factors, including their common sense, and applying the law in that way.
Do you agree with me that any given set of facts that one judge in courtroom A can make a decision one way, and on the same set of facts, the judge in courtroom B can decide something different?
Yes.
But which one isn't following the law?
I don't know which one isn't following the law, but I think that is more the judge's discretion and how they've used it.
So my feeling is judges don't follow the law in the district court and the superior court. They interpret the law as they see it. That's why we have appeals courts, right? And if every judge followed the law, then we wouldn't need appeals courts.
That's true.
I think you got a good diverse background, and your counselor Chris Iannella was very supportive of you to me. And Nicole Taub, who's the lawyer for the mayor of Braintree, called me. A couple lawyers in Braintree. She talked to a couple of the lawyers in Braintree. She called me. The other thing is, you live on River Street in Boston, you said.
Mattapan, yes.
Well, is it Mattapan or is it Dorchester?
So funny you should say that. You should ask that because when I originally moved in, as you probably know, I grew up in Milton. So I had been on that street many times, and I always called it Dorchester, but according to my zip code, it's Mattapan.
I heard there was some sort of a conflict up at the DA's office about whether it was Mattapan or whether it was Dorchester.
I'm unaware of this conflict.
Oh, okay. You lived in Milton for a while?
That's where I grew up.
Oh, really? You could have told me that right from the beginning. You still live there? Yeah. Kevin Mullen also called me. He doesn't want to lose you. So I'm torn.
Well, Kevin will be fine.
Be fine? Okay. No, I think you're a great candidate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before we hear from the next council, I always thought of 02126 is always Mattapan, and Dorchester has multiple zip codes, am I right? Thank you. I apologize. I forgot one of the counselors, Counselor Mary Hurley, and then I'll go to Counselor Devaney. So we'll hear from Counselor Mary Hurley if she has any questions.
Good morning. Just to clear up the zip code issue, I was a resident of Springfield. I bought a house in Springfield. It was right on the border of Springfield and Longmeadow. So I had a Longmeadow zip code, even though I was a Springfield resident. So you don't go by zip code, you go by what it actually says in the deed. But that's aside from the fact. I have a few questions. I know that you've done an awful lot of work with domestic violence. We talked for some length the other day. My question to you is, if you are the judge in a case where a woman is charged with assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon with a knife, and also some other various charges on her domestic partner, and you're the judge sitting there, and the defense attorney's defense is that she was the victim of domestic violence, would that affect your ability to render a fair and impartial judgment in that case?
I don't think it would affect my ability to render a fair and impartial judgment, but certainly it's a factor that I would consider, particularly in sentencing, and factor I would consider. Her own trauma is a factor that I would consider.
All right. In that particular case, there is no evidence whatsoever of any prior calls to the police department, any prior restraining orders, or any prior complaints filed against the domestic partner who's now the victim.
So while I appreciate that sort of that evidence not being there, you know, I would take that into account. I also would take into consideration what I know, that many survivors of domestic violence don't call the police, they don't file restraining orders, they don't make complaints. So while I would take that into consideration, I also, using my own just experience working with survivors of domestic violence, I also know that sometimes those things aren't present.
There's no evidence before you.
I appreciate that, but as you know, my own common sense, I know that those things sometimes don't happen, and certainly for a variety of reasons. I may ask questions of, I may ask more questions to figure out for my own purposes whether, you know, how long the violence has been occurring or alleged domestic violence has been occurring before I make a determination.
All right. You think that because there's no expert presented by the defense on the issue of domestic violence, you can, sua sponte, take into consideration your own experience without any evidence in the case being offered?
Well, certainly, I don't think I can just decide what the evidence is, but I can rely on my own experience to ask the right questions, or to ask questions that might inform me so that I can make the right decision that's fair, and takes everyone into, you know, takes both sides into consideration.
All right, hold on one second, please. So, in the converse, if you've got a case before you where someone is charged with domestic abuse or domestic violence against a female victim, are you going to take into consideration your knowledge of domestic violence in terms of sentencing?
I think it would inform in terms of sentencing with respect to services that I might, or some of the conditions I might impose. But again, I think what I would be inclined to do is ask questions to, you know, that I think based on 20 years of experience working with survivors of domestic violence will help me sort of sort through some of the issues so that I can try to address the issues before me in the most efficient way, in the way where services or the conditions that are imposed make sense.
All right. We talked about the fact that you do not have a lot of experience in criminal law. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
So how do you think you're going to be able to step into a courtroom as a new judge and be able to be aware of all of the issues that come before a district court judge on a daily basis without having the experience that you need?
I certainly appreciate that I have a lot of work to do, a lot of learning, a lot of things that, while I only practiced criminal law for 4 years, that I need to relearn. But I certainly, I know that there's other colleagues that I can rely on, but also whether it's case law or, the Red Book or the source book, I definitely know that I'm comfortable that I would need to do a lot of research, which I'm not afraid to get me to where I need to be in terms of on the criminal law side of things.
Have you done any before today?
I have.
What have you done?
Well, so one of the things that I did in the fall, I went over to the BMC. Before today, there's a few cases that I read, just to sort of, cases that were different, or things were a little bit different when I was practicing, like Creighton and Norman and Long. I have not, I've read good portions of the Red Book, which, I still have mine from 2007, but the updated version, as well as looked at some of the different statutes that I think come up often in the district court, like chapter 123 and the different sections, as well as the 58A, section 58A for dangerousness hearings and in the bail statute.
When you say to a Red Book, what are you referring to?
Judge Grasso and Judge McAvoy's book on motions to suppress.
Okay. Have you ever read any of the books that used to be written by Ken Smith or now by Ellie Cipher?
Not recently. I don't think I have not recently. I don't know if I don't recall if I ever have.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Counselor.
very much. Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you
Thank you
again.
for taking that trip to Watertown. I really appreciated that. Before I question you, I have to say, I am so honored that my good friend, former police commissioner, Bill Ross, is here. We missed you. I miss you. First of all, I just wanted to go back to how you got here, your journey. So how many members of the JNC were there when they interviewed you?
I want to say 10, but off by a number.
Well, I say it all the time, it goes nowhere because no one supports me. This is the first administration that we haven't had the 21 lawyers that are appointed by the governor to be at a hearing. They have never been in this administration 21 present. So that means 11 people voted. They never saw you. They never talked to you. And believe me, I support you. I think you're wonderful, but that's not the way it should be. So having said that, I'm venting. So anyway, I like the idea you're well balanced, 60% civil, 40% criminal. And I think it's amazing. I haven't seen this in my tenure, that someone's going to the bench and you have 3 languages. Actually, you didn't mention English. So you have 4, Portuguese, Cape Verdean, Creole, and French. Isn't that wonderful? That's amazing. So that's a great, great asset in Boston to know those languages. Now, we have a sample of your writing. All the nominees do that. It was quite controversial, this one that you chose. Tell us about it.
It was it was a recent case. I think it's still going on. The city of Boston and the mayor were sued by a high-ranking former cabinet member who had been, I don't remember who had left the administration after some allegations of sexual harassment. There's a lawsuit in that regard as well that suing the city. But this particular one, I had actually just filed the motion to dismiss and dismiss the city and the mayor. That's the right example.
It's just incidental, but you know, a lot of these questions were yes or no, and you put not applicable, you know? I mean, if you were in the service, it's yes or no, it's not applicable, but all the other things, but it happens, I see it, I see that a lot. I like the idea that you believe in second chances. That's so important, and I won't vote for anyone if they don't have compassion, and you have it. So tell us about that case where the 3 juveniles, the 2 with the armed robbery.
Certainly. That was actually probably one of the more challenging cases. So just briefly, the facts, these 3 young men had been drinking and smoking marijuana at one of their houses and decided to go on a crime spree. I think they committed 3 armed robberies that evening. And frankly, we wouldn't have been able to solve the crimes, but for the parents, literally within the next day, marching them into the D4 police station in the South End and essentially having them confess to those crimes. And that to me meant a lot. We want kids to do the right thing. These parents, I think, had their kids do the right thing. Having said that, it was a case that easily could have been indicted, but we wouldn't have solved the crime without their cooperation, but it probably could have easily been indicted. But 2 of the young men, the defense attorneys had approached me and talked about, one of them I think was headed to Northeastern. The other one also had not been involved in crime or had not been involved in the criminal justice system. And somehow I managed to convince my boss as well as Judge Johnson. I decided not to indict them because I thought that they deserved, well, first of all, I thought that their support system obviously was there for them. While it was obviously a very egregious mistake that they made that evening, I thought that there were lots of aspects of it where they deserved some sort of credit. And so I didn't indict them, which took some convincing, but I decided to offer a suspended to DYS because in my view, particularly with children, it was up to them to make the choices to either, they knew what was before them and they needed to make those choices, and 2 of them did. One of them, unfortunately, I subsequently learned that he was committed to DYS, but I thought that case was, I think it highlights the importance of giving people second chances. And so.
A lot of nominees don't have not authored any writings, and you have. They were interesting titles, so can you tell us about that? You had police misconduct cases, setting the stage for success at trial. So tell us about those writings, and they were published in the International Municipal Lawyers Association magazine. That's very impressive.
Yeah, so actually my co-author here is one of my colleagues. I think it actually was one article. The other one I think I just presented with a colleague out of the Philadelphia Law Department. Much of the work that I did at the city was 1983 cases, which is essentially what we sort of use colloquially on the federal side to refer to police misconduct cases. And we part of, I think, being a practitioner and defending those cases really revolves around discovery. Some of them can be pretty, there's a lot of discovery in some of those cases, depending on whether a city is involved, there's a city in claim. So essentially the writing was more of a practical approach on how to navigate those cases with respect to discovery.
Chose those topics.
Those topics are, at the city, it's a lot of what we do. In my practice more recently, between that and employment, those are essentially most of my cases. So it was an area that I thought I could share some of my thoughts on. Be entering into that area of law and to navigate, the discovery can be pretty extensive.
And then there's one of, I remember the home invasion, the armed robbery, kidnapping. That's my case.
That was quite a case. I actually didn't start off as such. It was days before Thanksgiving when a police officer came into my office or detective, excuse me, and was telling me about this case. One thing sort of led to another and kept leading to another. It was just, I learned a lot from that case. Having no expectation when I at the end that that's how much I was going to learn, but certainly learned a lot from that case. Ended up trying it. There were 5 or 6 adults, 1 juvenile. We tried the youthful offender case in juvenile court, and the adults all pled out.
Do you think the age should be extended in the juvenile court? That's where we separate. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. And it just brings to mind the tragedy that we're going through right now. So is there any learning curve for you to be at the BMC rather than the other courts that you worked in?
Yes, I anticipate that I have a lot of learning to do and some refreshing to do on district court practices and the issues that impact the district court the most, given that I've been away for a little bit. So I do think that it's going to take me, hopefully not too long.
Well, no bias on my part, but I just want to tell you, I have 4 children. I have a daughter and son-in-law, son, and 2 grandchildren that graduate from BC. So it has nothing to do with you graduating from BC. What a wonderful school. They've made such many friends here. But again, thank you for all the time you took with me. The council voted 7-1 on one that they timed me. And so it's only 15 minutes. So they're going to say time's up. So I'm going to stop right now. So they won't ring a bell. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Eileen Duff.
Thank you. It was good to see you. We had a great talk. I enjoyed our time. I'm not going to rehash a lot of the things that have already been said. You know the issues that I care about, and why I care about them. I think that you and I are on the same page of, I hope, sentence bench that as a judge you will use some creativity in your sentencing to achieve goals which will otherwise not being achieved. And I talked to you a little bit about the Anchor program in Boston and how RDA hated these programs when they were rolled out. They've been wildly successful in helping folks with addictions overcome their addictions and stay sober. Unfortunately, the survival rate for anyone addicted, survival rate, I mean, of sobriety forever is 15%. It's very low and people don't know it. Anyway, enough of that. Tell me a little bit about your support system that you have. I care very much about the impact of public pressure, about the press, sometimes about public officials, criticizing the judiciary. I'm sure I've done it as well. But I'm adamant about the separation of powers, and also that as a judge, you will be privy to information we're not. You will see things you don't. You won't always understand or know why you may not make a decision. As a result of that, and as a result of the society we live in today, people can be pretty vicious. You're a young woman. You could have a very long career as a judge in one capacity or another. You're going to need help from your community and support. What do you have?
Well, certainly there's a few of them here in the room. Some of the people that are here I've known for over 20 years. And what that actually translates into are people who not only are my support system, but can tell me when it's time to take a vacation or a break. Yes. So that's the benefit of having those lifelong friendships, that you have no problem telling me those things. My family are amazing. They're a tremendous support system. My niece is 18 years old, and anyone who has teenagers knows that they're not afraid to tell you what thing or two. But also, and we talked about this, I'm really cognizant of self-care and what that looks like. We don't talk about it enough as lawyers. Luckily, when we talked a little bit about this on the nonprofit side, people do talk about that. And we've been talking about that for years. And I was fortunate enough to have started working in one capacity or another in the nonprofit sector when I was 15 years old. So how burnout is something that I'm very cognizant of, and not that I know how to handle it all the time, but I certainly have some tools that I've been using for years that I would anticipate continuing to use.
I'm glad to hear that. And you've also brought up the point of self-care. And I think our judges, our justice chiefs, have been doing a really great job trying, addressing these issues. But that's something we don't ever talk about. We never talk about it. I think it's, again, I bless you for wanting to even serve. And I really mean that. A woman with your background, your intellectual capacity, your knowledge of languages, your knowledge of different cultures, you could be making a heck of a lot of money. And, it's a challenge that the Commonwealth has, is getting folks to step up and step away from the money to serve the Commonwealth. When you open the newspaper and you get whacked all the time. You're living off the dole because you're a public servant. Well, you know what? Most people are doing a darn good job. I've worked in the private sector and I've worked in the public sector. I worked very briefly in the Clinton administration. And I've never worked with people that work with really limited resources sometimes, comparing to what we were up against with private law firms and such. So thank you for that. I admire it. I'm sure the commissioner understands the self-care. My brother-in-law was chief of Alexandria, Virginia, and the pressure of these public jobs is tremendous, really tremendous. We don't acknowledge it. We don't talk about it. I agree with you on, and I apologize for being late. I had the wrong time for the hearing, but my colleague here to the right is an expert on the juvenile issues. And I don't know if he's spoken to you yet about it, but, we again are faced with a horrific tragedy in the United States that happened yesterday, and we're all saying it's mental health, but I don't believe that. I was a fellow at Mass General as a chaplain and was assigned to the psych unit in a locked unit within a locked unit. And, some of our gun violence has to do with mental health, but not most of it, to be really honest. And we have to stop deflecting and saying that. Other countries have the same issues we have and they're not killing each other. But how do you deal with these hot button issues? This is a hot button and everyone's hair is on fire and prayer and hope and all that. It's baloney. What do we do?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I think it's a
I don't expect you to, frankly. It's a philosophical.
Yeah.
But you were a philosophy minor, so.
I was. It didn't prepare me for that question, that's for sure. I don't know. I wish I could be the answer to that question, but I don't know. What I do know is that you gotta do something because to do something.
Well, we have an epidemic that we can control. We can control it or rein it in a little bit. Maybe not completely, but somewhat. Yet as a country, there were others with financial interests that have decided it's not worth it. And I don't know that we ever learned, to be really honest. I was in DC when President Reagan was on his assassination attempt. And if that didn't stop it, I don't know what stops it. Not to put Commissioner Gross on the I don't understand why police officers aren't screaming at the top of their lungs for gun control. because they're the ones getting shot at all the time. And you know what? When you're an officer and it's fight or flight, and you've got a second, or not even a second, to decide whether to draw your weapon and save your own life, sometimes you're gonna make a mistake. But is it fair to even put these officers in this position? I don't think it is. And I don't think it's necessary, because other countries don't do it. We don't need to do it. I know I'm lecturing you. That's not what my time is for, but it's just, this is happening again and again. And, you know, if you, Commissioner Gross, have influence in that community still, which I'm sure you do, I implore the officers, I implore them to lead the fight for gun control, because they are the ones top of list being killed, not just kids, them. It's crazy out there. I think you're eminently qualified for this job. I do think you have a learning curve. You're going to be filling some big shoes. Yes, Judge. Yes. But the BMC is so important. And the reason I asked about the self-care and the mental health stuff of your own and your support system is because in that court, another thing we don't talk about is that stuff you're going to see, probably the stuff you've already seen, the stuff our DAs see, the stuff our prosecutors see, the stuff our defense attorneys see, the stuff our judges see. It's often horrific stuff. And in the work you've already done, I'm sure you've heard stories and you've seen things that no one ever wants to see once in their life, but to see it on a daily, weekly basis, it takes a toll. And I think it's really important that you acknowledge that, and your people around you acknowledge it, that, you know, it doesn't give you permission to be a jerk, but at times you're going to need to be held up. And so thank you for applying. I think you have a lot to contribute to the Commonwealth, and I hope that, you know, you will have an opportunity to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councilor Ferreira.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nice seeing you. We had a very nice chat the other day. I appreciate the fact that you speak Portuguese and some other languages as well. The fact that you bring Commissioner Gross with you today speaks volumes. As my former life as a police chief, I spent some time with Commissioner Gross, and I have great admiration and respect for him and the job he did. So thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. You have a stellar resume. It's, you know, you should be retired by now. This case that you look at, I can't believe you've been practicing for 13 years. This resume looks like it's far more filled than some people that have been practicing for 30 years, for sure. When we spoke, we didn't talk about one thing that just dawned on me this morning. Over a year ago, this group brought up problems with the Court Officer Academy in Massachusetts. Are you familiar with what happened?
A little bit. I am a little bit, but not.
Did you read that there was a 5-member investigative team led by a former U.S. Marshal, Nancy McGilvery, Kevin Burke, and some other people that did an extensive investigation, the allegations?
I didn't read the report, but I think I was reading the news articles.
Well, the one that's been released so far is heavily redacted. But notwithstanding that, it was damning about the hazing, the assaultive behavior, the things that people were tortured for 8 years in the academy. The direct result of that coming out within a day, the director of security for the trial court resigns. I'm still getting calls today about the people who were named, who were complicit in all of this stuff, that are still getting paid by the state today, almost a year later. With your training, education, and experience, and your defense of people in 1983 actions, you think it should take a year to get rid of a bad cop?
I don't, but I know sort of in terms of the behind the scenes, sometimes depending on internal affairs and, you know, whatever they do. I mean, ideally, in a perfect setting, that person should be on administrative leave. Does that always happen? No. I don't think it should take a year. Have I seen it take a year and longer? Yes. Fortunate, but
Well, I was a police chief, and, you know, fortunately, I didn't have to deal with civil service because we're a non-civil service town. So I understand that people have, you know, due process rights, and I believe in that. But it's frustrating for victims and other people to see that people are getting paid by us taxpayers for a year or more when very evident what happened. So I'm not sure why some agencies don't terminate people, but then let them fight it on the other side. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know that there's other factors that come into play. You mentioned civil service. I think for some departments that, I think there's some rules that get a little bit murky, that I'm not familiar with, quite frankly. So I don't know. I agree with you that it shouldn't take a year. I know that it does, and I do think there's some, whether it's civil service or union or whatever the case may be, I know there's some factors that definitely are weighed in making those decisions.
Do you think that people that want to be caught officers should have to stand there at attention, be slapped across the face?
Absolutely not. I don't.
You think that rises to the level of a Section 1983 criminal violation or civil violation?
It might, not knowing all of the facts, but based on what you're saying to me, yes.
Thank you. Counselor Iannellis talked to me, Counselor Kennedy, and you have the respect of Counselor Juvenile. Those are people that go to court the most around here. Your resume is, like I said, phenomenal. I think you're going to make a big difference in the lives of many people going forward. You certainly have my support.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you for all your accomplishments and for dedicating your life to the Commonwealth.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
We had a lengthy conversation. It's a pleasure to see you and meet you, and I didn't realize that you're very close friends with one of my employees. You've actually been over her house for dinner, and she makes pies, and she speaks very highly of you. But no, we had a great conversation. I just have one question. You're a board member of the project, or you were a board member of the Project Right for like, I don't know, 4 years. Tell me about that.
So Project Right focuses on the Grove Hall area. They've been there for so many years. They're really an institution in the lower, I think that's Lower Roxbury Community Grove Hall. And they basically do everything. Michael Cody, his last name is Koziol. He is just phenomenal. Even at the DA's office currently, if we call and if we need anything, he is absolutely on board. And so they do tremendous work with mostly youth in the community, but they do a lot of work with elderly. They're really just an institution that, frankly, the city and the kind of agencies that the city needs in order to function, frankly.
Well, thank you. I don't have any more questions. It was great to see everyone here, the commissioner, my good friend, Attorney Lydon. He's got like 10 brothers and sisters. But it was really special to see your parents. I thought that might be your mother in the beginning, and then we sent someone out there and she was waiting for your father, but no, that was great. Your daughter did such a wonderful job. She's going to be a credit to the judiciary, and next week when we have our formal meeting, I'd be more than happy to put your name before the council, and I wish you the very best. Thank you. That will conclude the hearing.
Okay, you here? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Hear you.
We can hear. Okay. Good morning. This is the hearing.
Mary?
Attorney. Oh, Terry, why don't you take over?
All right, I will. Okay, I'm gonna start the hearing.
Me.
I'm gonna read a letter from the governor. I am pleased to nominate Mary Cody to the position of Clerk-Magistrate of the Berkshire District Juvenile Court, Berkshire Juvenile Court. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles Baker, Governor. Why don't you tell us who you have here?
Good morning, everybody. This is my father, Albert Gallant, and this is my mother, Linda Gallant.
Great. And for the councilors that are present in the room, everybody's here, but we have Councilor Ferraro, we have Councilor Iannella, we have Councilor DiPaolo, and we have Councilor Juvenile. We're going to start with your witnesses that I think are on Zoom. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And Judge Shaw, Judge, are you can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Judge, we'd love to hear from you. What would you like to say about the nominee?
Well, first I'd like to say good morning to everyone and begin by thanking the Governor's Council, not only for taking into consideration my comments today, but I also need to say that 6 years ago in May, I sat in that very same chair before you and was fortunate enough to be confirmed as an Associate Justice of the Juvenile Court. I will forever be
Judge, when you were here, you learned about the law of brevity, right?
I did. And I'm going to get right to it.
Thank you for your testimony.
Well, I am very mindful of your time, and I have jotted down some notes, and I do intend to keep it brief, but I certainly could go on for hours about Attorney Gallant-Cote. She is just an outstanding candidate, and I am thrilled that she sits before you today, nominated for the Clerk-Magistrate position. I just want to briefly point out that I was a DCF attorney in Berkshire County for about 13 years. I was then an assistant clerk magistrate in Hampden County for 4 years before being appointed to the bench. So I've had an opportunity to not only know Berkshire County well, but also observe Attorney Gallant-Cote in her different roles from those different perspectives. I think that gives me a unique set of lenses to talk about her skills and abilities and the reason why I so strongly support her candidacy. One of the first reasons that shouldn't go without saying is that she knows the law, the rules, the statutes, the procedures inside and out. I find many times when she's presenting a case before me, I start to jot down questions, things that I want to ask before she's done. And usually by the time she's done, she's already answered every question that I had. She thinks ahead, she strategizes, she's prepared for everything. And I see those skills as being necessary in a clerk magistrate. Another important set of skills that Attorney Gallant-Cote has is she is a real problem solver. She has the ability to stay calm when everyone else starts to escalate. And I think people are drawn to that calmness. With that, then, she can gather people together to identify problems, talk about possible solutions, and then make things happen. To me, that's a critical skill for a clerk magistrate. She also treats people with such tremendous respect. And I have seen her in situations where parents who might have mental health issues or are in the throes of withdrawal from addiction get pretty aggressive with her from the witness stand. And I am always amazed at her ability to remain calm, professional, and treat people with respect, to the point that often that's what leads to the resolutions that she's able to coordinate on her own, rather than relying on me as a judge to make those decisions. I appreciate when it's a particularly complex case and Attorney Gallant-Cote stands and says that she's there to represent the department, because I know there'll be a steady hand guiding that case through the process and coming up with a solution that's going to keep a child safe and work for everyone else involved. Lastly, I think one of the most important skills that she has is this ability to work across boundaries. You know, the clerk magistrate position is unique because they're part of a triumvirate that makes every court work. The judicial department, the probation department, and the clerk magistrate's office all have their own responsibilities. They all have boundaries that need to be recognized, and they all need to work together collaboratively in order to make a court work. And I can't think of a better person for Berkshire County to take on that role and do that work with the other departments. So for those reasons, and as I said, many more that I could describe, I wholeheartedly support her candidacy. I think she'll be a tremendous asset to Berkshire County and to the juvenile court as a whole. I'm certainly willing to answer any questions that anyone might have, but I am mindful of your time.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you, Judge. We're going to call next Dr. Paul Weitzer, Professor of Economics, History, and Political Science at Fitchburg State College. That's a big title, Professor.
Thanks. I appreciate your time this morning as well. And I appreciate the judge's testimony also. I'll be brief too, but I appreciate the chance to share my experiences with you today. I've known Mary for more than 20 years at this point, which says a lot. She was among the first cohort of students that I had the opportunity to work with when I came to Fitchburg State University, but she stood out right away from that group. When I started the moot court program at the school back in the year 2000, Mary was one of 4 students on that inaugural team. She competed for 2 seasons in American Moot Court Association national championship tournaments where she and her partner performed admirably and enjoyed great success. That experience allowed me to see firsthand how well developed at a very young age her skills were and how much potential she had. And I was very fortunate to have a very small role in helping her realize that potential. As our moot court program grew both in size and prominence, I began the practice of having Fitchburg State alums who did moot court as students come back and work with students as well and help me in coaching the teams. And Mary was immediately the first person I thought of and was amongst the first to serve in that role. And getting a chance to work with her then in that professional setting further cemented the appreciation I have for her as an individual. She was quickly able to establish a natural rapport with our young advocates, where she has just a really good ability to connect. She can at once be both authoritative and approachable, which is no small feat. She did a great job in breaking down complex legal arguments and making them understandable to non-lawyers. People were able to understand these topics. I'm sorry.
A little technical issue, that's all. Okay, go ahead, Professor.
I will continue. Moot court is an activity, particularly at the undergraduate level, also puts competitors under great pressure and stress, and Mary does a great job in helping people deal with those emotions, yet still thrive and be able to process things in the moment. She showed great commitment to providing service to our program and to the young people that we serve. She would drive more than an hour each way to help teach our class, and I should point out, did so for very little money. Her passion to the school and to the program and to helping young advocates develop their skills so that they could follow the path that she did was evident, and I'm so appreciative of that. She served in this coaching role for 5 seasons until she had her own child, but she has remained actively connected to Fitchburg State Moot Court throughout her career. She continues to come back annually to serve as a judge at our regional competitions. She has recruited other legal professionals to do the same. It's her ongoing commitment to service, which is why I am here today with you. I will say I followed her career from afar. Professionally, she's eminently qualified for this position, having served both as a state certified advocate for the rights of children and then in her current position working for DCF. She's been on both sides of the courtroom, and so clearly understands all perspectives that are involved. Having worked as a solo practitioner and in a very large bureaucratic state agency, she's shown the ability to work in any type of setting and thrive in any type of setting. And finally, I just want to say that I find Mary to be of the highest personal integrity. She is a very progressive individual. She's a very compassionate individual. She is fully committed to seeing the development of each person as an individual. She has the right skills and the right temperament for this job, and she will be an outstanding clerk magistrate. I recommend her to you without reservation.
Thank you very much, Doctor. We appreciate your testimony. Does anybody have any questions for the doctor? Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to ask if there's anybody in opposition to the nominee. Would you mind helping out and see if there's anybody waiting to come in and testify against you?
Sure.
Kidding. Hearing none, we'll close that portion of the hearing, and the floor is yours. Why don't you already introduced your parents, so go ahead.
Okay, I would also like to be very, very mindful of your time and just start by saying good morning to all of you, and that my sitting before you is truly the result of cumulative efforts on my behalf, as it is the result of my own efforts. So there's several people I'd like to thank, but I will talk fast. I'd like to thank Governor Charles Baker.
Take all the time you need.
Okay. And Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito for their faith in me in making this nomination. I'd like to thank the members of the Judicial Nominating Committee, the Joint Bar Committee, and attorneys Robert Ross and Lauren Green-Petrigno. Also to Attorney Green-Petrigno for her humor, her frankness, and lots of guidance she provided to me through this process. I'd like to thank Emily Gothier and Caitlin Babin for their assistance and their kindness, as well as Valerie McCarthy for her kindness and for her assistance, especially with helping my witnesses be here virtually today. I'd also like to really genuinely thank the council. Please know that it is not lost on me what an enormous privilege and honor it is to sit before you, and I really mean that. Sometimes I kind of can't believe that I'm here. And I thank you so much for your time and your consideration of my nomination. And thank you to Councillor Hurley also for her advice and her guidance through this process. I want to thank my colleagues both at DCF, in the defense bar, and the judges of both the Hampden County and Berkshire juvenile courts. They are an unspeakably dedicated group of people to juvenile court work, which is sometimes shrouded in mystery, given that it's confidential. But I can tell you the people working in those courts are pushing harder and harder to make things better every day, and I'm very lucky to have been part of that. I'd like to thank my witnesses, Dr. Paul Weiser and Judge Carol Shaw, so very much for their years of mentoring and guidance through my whole career, as well as this process. They've both been invaluable to me, and I'm so, so grateful for their kind words and their time. With respect to my family, I just want to thank my husband, Robert. Since I decided to pursue this opportunity, I very much introduced additional stress into the household that may not have otherwise existed, but he's been really unflappable in his support of me and my career, and I'm so grateful for him. Also to his parents, who I know are watching, hello. They've provided so much support and lots of childcare, and I'm so grateful to them. They're incredibly important people in my life. To our son, Sully, I hope that he thinks I am cool now because I'm on YouTube. That's my greatest wish for today. I love you so much. You're the best thing I ever did, and it's an honor to be your mother. And finally, to my parents, Albert and Linda, they are the foundation on which everything I have built truly is built. I have a lot written about them, but I'm not going to say it all because I won't cry. They're the hardest working, most dedicated people I've ever met. They sacrificed enormous amounts for my brother and I to be successful. They came from very humble backgrounds and just worked from the ground up their whole lives. They were an example, and growing up in the family I grew up in was truly my greatest blessing. They taught me so much about just pushing through life, working hard, believing in the ability to overcome odds and achieve success. Through my academic years in high school, I was not very academically minded. I was not a standout academically or athletically or in any way. And when I graduated, I said, well, I'm just going to get a job. I'm not going to go to college. And they were like, that's a fun story, and that's not happening. And I left Fitchburg State College with no loans because they, my whole life, put their money where their mouth is, and they paid for my college degree to make sure I got it. So I can't pay enough homage to them, truly. My path to law school was kind of a strange one. After college, I worked at Hertz Rent-A-Car for a while. I hope built character. I watched a lot of cars. It was an interesting path. And then finally, a voice in my head that had come from Dr. Weiser and other people in my life said, you've got to go to law school. This really is what you want to do. And I finally got up, I think, the courage to go. And I did some internships. I worked at Western Mass Legal Services in the DA's office. And once I was in the courtroom, I was absolutely hooked. I knew that that's where I belonged. I started largely in private practice doing divorce and criminal defense, which I enjoyed and worked really hard at, but I don't know that I ever felt it was my niche. But I can say that the juvenile court, when I first was introduced to work there, became really my home away from home for the last 10 years, and I wouldn't have it any other way. It's interesting and challenging, and the high rate of litigation really satisfied me professionally, but it's also become very personal to me. The cases there, they just have heart. There's families at stake. There's children at stake. And I've always fought hard for my clients, but those cases really took on heightened meaning for me. And it's been almost a decade of hard work and often heartbreak, but I know the juvenile court is where I belong and where I want to stay. 2 more seconds. To be the clerk-magistrate in the juvenile court is really the culmination of all my professional and personal interests. I don't want to do the job for the prestige or the salary, both of which are wonderful, but I really want to be part of the system in a different way where I can try to implement things that make the lives of young people better. So I am privileged and proud to be here, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much. Counselor Ferrera, I'm sitting in Mary's slot, so it's the person to her right that would go. So you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Wow, you're a really fast talker.
Sorry.
I don't have any questions for you. Counselor Hurley is a big fan of yours. You've been in courts, in the juvenile court, every day for years. Clearly, you know what you're doing, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much.
Counselor Juvenile.
Thank you. So you work for Hertz?
Yes, I did.
They used to have an ad where they had a guy in a chair that would come and sit in the moving car. I think O.J. Simpson might have been the guy in the chair back then. Did you ever get in the chair and?
I did not. I was just in the garage, literally scrubbing and vacuuming. Yeah, no, I wasn't in the commercials.
I think you're extremely qualified. You've got the background for the juvenile court, and you're very into such that court, and people in that court I find are just so dedicated to that court. It's really when I go in, I don't go in much, but when I go in, I get that feeling from everybody. I think it's going to be a great fit in Pittsfield. And when I'm out there in a few weeks, if you're out there, I'll buy a coffee. But I'm going to vote for you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Counselor.
Counselor Devaney.
See, thank you for coming that distance. I think that Justice Island beat you. I think he had to come further. But
It was my pleasure.
It was my pleasure. First of all, how did, before the J&C, how many were there?
How many? Oh, 12, I believe. I believe it was 12.
12, yeah. Well, there's 21 should be there, but let that go. I can't do anything about it. But so tell me, how did you, well, I like your background. Department of Family. I'm not a fan.
Yes.
I think of Harmony. I think of Baby Bella. So many that you know help them. So I'm just wondering if you could be candid. How do you think that could be improved?
So that's a big question. Obviously, the Department of Children and Families is an enormous agency. And there's so many different factors in how they operate and what they do. I think that what I would want to say, and not to simply just sort of be defensive of them, but truly to put it out there that I know the public hears about the tragedies, and they are undoubtedly tragedies, but there's so much good work that goes on at the department. There's so many success stories, and you know, we don't hear about those, but like any agency, certainly it can be improved. And I think there's things right now that are happening to work on improving it, and there are things that I would want to continue to be part of. I know there's an initiative right now called the Pathways Initiative, and it was implemented by Chief Justice Nectum and Judge Shaw. And it really took hold in Berkshire a couple of years ago before the pandemic. And what it is it's a different way of approaching the civil side of the juvenile court so that cases are categorized differently from the moment that they come into the court. So typically there's sort of a long track record. There's a lot that's involved in a case, and I won't belabor all the details of that work, but the Pathways model looks at the case differently right from the beginning. And it says, okay, this is a brand new family to the department. There's really not a huge amount of risk factors, but they need help. You know, it's maybe a single mother who has maybe a domestic violence situation or you know, is really suffering for the effects of poverty. It puts the case on a short track, and it puts a team sort of intensively working with that family to monitor risk and really understand what the family's needs are. And then alternatively, when there's a case where the risk factors are very, very high, where there's a very long history, maybe prior terminations of rights, very significant substance abuse histories, incarcerations, violence, things like that, it's also put on a different track, and again, more intensive track, but in a different way, so that there are a different level of monitoring on that case, both at the department, from the judicial perspective, and the expectations are different about how that case is going to move through the court. And it's really a way of acknowledging acknowledging that these cases are not cookie cutter, they're not all the same. And I think by prioritizing things based on the issues specifically presented by the case makes the system more efficient for the families involved and for the stakeholders involved. And it also puts more resources on the cases where the risk to the child is higher.
You know, getting back to Harmony, I don't understand why the department didn't get involved in that when it went to the Massachusetts court, because the history was the father was violent.
Mm-hmm.
He admitted he beat her, special needs, blind in one eye, and even made her clean the toilet with her toothbrush. So it was, they were in the middle of getting a report if the home was safe for her to go with the father.
Right.
He didn't wait. That's where it should have ended. I don't blame anyone else, but I blame that judge. And I called because I said, you should not be a recall judge. You don't, how can I say, if you had a child that misbehaved, you don't reward them. So why would you reward this person? And that poor little baby, from the time she was 2 months old, why didn't they have a safe foster home to be loved? She never had that.
Well, I certainly don't have any inside information on that.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's just one example.
No, I understand.
You know, what's going on. But, what is your criteria for removal of a child?
So the legal standard is whether a child is at imminent risk of abuse or neglect in their family home. That's the legal standard for whether a removal is initiated.
You know, in this pandemic, that was I said it to my children. I worry more about the children being abused because we don't know. You don't know out there. And the babies, we have no idea. But if they were school age, they'd be going to school, they would show some symptoms or the teacher would say, so we lost a lot in that pandemic.
I agree.
That I'm concerned about. Now, okay, you have your sample of writings. Tell me about that, about the father, trying to get his older children. Tell us that.
So that was one of the first cases I ever did in the juvenile court, and it was a situation, and I can't provide a lot of identifying information, but it was a situation where a child had accused the father of sexual abuse. And I wrote about that case only because it was the first real confrontation I had with just how complex the circumstances could be, trying to root out the facts, and the different players in the case had very strong positions on what should happen. But it was a case that really challenged me professionally because it's difficult subject matter. And it really taught me, that you have to fight for your client. I did believe that the result of the case was just personally. He did reunify with his other children, and my understanding is that they've all gone on to be very happy and successful. But I wrote about that case specifically because I think as lawyers and in jobs like clerk-magistrate, you confront really, really difficult situations, things that are not comfortable to talk about and not comfortable to exist. But that was a real example of me sort of maintaining professionalism and working within the system, despite a really difficult set of facts.
When a case remains open, and so what happens to the child in question at that time? Because, you had a case, 2021, 11 consecutive days, and that case is still out there.
Yes.
What happens to the child? Because it's about parental rights. And the child's mother. So in the meantime, where is the child?
That child was with family the entire time. Throughout the entirety of the case, he was in an uninterrupted placement through the department with a very close family member. That family member is actually going to be the child's permanency resource, meaning they're adopting him. So that was a very solid and good situation where, despite the complexity of the legal situation that was surrounding him, he was just living with family, going to school, going to camp. The child's life, of course, it's affected by the proceedings. I would never say otherwise. But he really was maintained in a loving home, and he still is, and is doing wonderfully.
But the sexual abuse is something a child, it's ruined. And I talked about it to you when we met. Thank you for all the time. We had a friend, and his daughter was at a daycare center. It was very publicized in Medford, and she was 3 years old. And she used to come home sometimes with someone else's panties, some with blood in her pants, sometimes, well, anyway, it turned out that he was guilty, this Chuki was guilty. And so it came before us, and if the governor had voted yes, then it would have come before us, but voted no. But that girl is a woman now. She's a forensic specialist. She's in California, and she's never had a lasting relationship. She's been engaged twice. That affected her life, all her life, to be abused, sexually abused. So I just think, it's so important who we have, because we're hearing this all the time in schools and everything. They're everywhere. So tell me, how did you get into this legal work? What attracted you to do this?
So I started, as I said, largely in probate and family court, doing divorces and custodies and guardianships and things like that. And then just by way of referrals from a colleague, I think is how I got the first care and protection case in the juvenile court. I want to say it was around 2009. And I don't know that I can pinpoint why it was a fit, but I really liked it. I liked the judges, I liked the body of law that runs the juvenile court, I liked the people I was working with there, and I liked, this is going to sound very cheesy, but I felt like from an advocacy standpoint, you could really make a difference in the juvenile court. It's not work that attracts a lot of people. It's kind of the third rail sometimes. I don't know that people love it there, but I just really felt like I connected with it. So I did it privately for a few years as it came in here and there, and then in 2013, I went through the CPCS training to be certified to take things, basically a bar advocate, but for the juvenile court, and represented children and parents after that certification up until I took the job at DCF in 2016.
What changes would you like to make in, if you could, in the agency that oversees, children and families? You must have seen it, and I know it's hard for you to say that now, but there are cases that fall within the cracks, and they don't even know the child is not at a home or whatever. Do you see there's a problem? It's been going on for years. I know Judge Locke, when he was there, he did a wonderful job. He really did. He worked hard, helped a lot of people. He helped a lot of women who had been prostitutes and their children taken away. He has rehabilitated them, gave them a home and everything. He's done a lot of those things. So I know that's the good part, but I'm very upset about what we hear in the present, and that's the thing. And like I said, the pandemic really concerned me because I don't know. How did you operate in the pandemic?
So the department operated largely virtual during the pandemic. Home visits and visits were over Zoom largely. There were circumstances where the commissioner would authorize people to go into the homes, and circumstances where there was we were aware of a very high risk or an emergency situation, but it was largely virtual. I will say that following some of the tragedies that have been publicized, the department has made some strides in that area to try to make things better. I know they recently implemented a new reunification policy that's been rolled out, and what that did is require higher levels of management to review a situation where any child is on the way home through the reunification process, and it also involves the legal team in a way that it might not ordinarily have been. So now, before a decision is made to send a child home, there's a much more comprehensive review of the case at a higher level of both legal and clinical management to ensure that that's safe. So there's a lot of things that are being worked on to improve, the
I like the idea that you worked in private practice too. Tell me, how does that add to your ability to be a clerk magistrate?
Sure. Well, I think private practice is kind of a whole different beast. And what I would say first is that really logistically, I think a lot of the skills translate. I had to do all of my bookkeeping, record keeping. I had a part-time employee at one point, so having payroll and taxes and all those things. So I'm, of course, on a much smaller scale than a clerk magistrate's office. But
it's a juvenile court you're going
yes,
to, right?
Yes.
I actually volunteered for a year in the court as a volunteer counselor for juveniles on probation. And, for my little world with 4 children and, never really winning, we didn't even have a car, so I never went for a ride. I you have a stereotype about juveniles. And I got to know each of them one-on-one, one-on-one, and it took a long time to get that confidence. And some of the horrific stories,
Yes.
lives that they've lived. Teenage girl locked in her room while mother's a prostitute and out for the night, she doesn't know who her father is. Those are the things that people really don't understand. And, you know, it was, that was a good experience for me, because how would I ever be, you know, see that? So, when you think of all positions, what do you think gives you the most out of that to be a successful clerk magistrate?
I think definitely my work as a defense attorney in the juvenile court, because that was an opportunity for a lot of years where I got to know the people as human beings and not as a caseload, which at the department, sometimes it's more of a caseload situation. But on the defense side, you know, I represented a lot of children who had the type of life that you've described, and you're in there and you're in the foster home with them and you're getting to know them as a person and talking about their problems at school, their problems at home, what they need to do better. And also working with the parents. You know, there is a lot of stigma about a lot of these parents who have horrible addiction issues. They're stuck in a cycle of violence. You know, they really have struggled, and it's a balancing act, the rights of the children.
Your children witnessing, you had one spouse that killed the other. Tell us about that. That's her.
Counselor, your 15 minutes is expired at this time. So we're going on to Counselor Iannella. Counselor Iannella.
Thank you very much.
Outrageous.
I don't have questions. I spoke with Counselor Hurley. He's very strong supporter of yours. Great to see your parents here today. She's going to be a great addition to the court system. And when your name comes before us next week, I'll be more than happy to support you.
Thank you very much, Counselor.
So Duff.
Thank you. You're eminently qualified for this job. I have no questions for you.
Thank you so much.
I actually find your resume a bit refreshing and some of the practicality
Thank you.
of your life experience. I think it's very relevant to, sorry.
Excuse me, she's.
But I find it very relevant to the position that
Thank
you're.
you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor DePaulo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going to ask you a couple questions. You've represented CRAs.
Yes.
Have you ever observed judges putting conditions on CRAs that you found inappropriate?
Yes.
And what would have been the basis for you finding them inappropriate?
I think what's difficult in a CRA situation is I do feel, and this is with the greatest due respect to the judges, a position I have not served in, is that I think there's an expectation that kids that are really struggling can then follow more rules and more guidelines and more impositions. And I don't think it addresses the struggle.
Is that a false assumption that the kids can do that? Is it a false assumption the kids will respond with new rules and new expectations?
I don't know that I would go so far as to say false. I know there are certainly some kids who thrive within the structure, but I do think that there's a fair amount of research that shows us that a different approach might be more effective.
Have you visited any of the group homes where where children in
Yes.
your area of the state would be sent?
I represented many adolescent boys on the CPCS side that were in group homes, and I would meet with them there regularly, yes.
And so that would inform your work as a
Absolutely.
Straight, I presume.
Absolutely.
And how about Grafton Job Corps? Did you meet a lot of children there who were also court involved?
My role with them wasn't really, that was a very entry-level position when I worked there, but they were, a lot of them had come through the foster care system or were court involved, yes. Those kids, I will say, were super inspirational, but that was really my first foray into kind of understanding that whole other world, that lived out there. And those kids, a lot of them were stars. They were really determined to make something of their lives, and they were doing it, they were inspirational.
Just one last question.
Sure.
So in the group homes, and I've worked in school settings as well, when kids have court dates coming up, their behavior and their dysregulation escalates ahead of time.
Yes.
And oftentimes that behavior and dysregulation is reported to the court.
Yes.
And then they face consequences for it when the inciting incident of the behavior was in fact the actual court date itself.
Yes.
You find that to be true?
I find that to be true, yes.
And you would inform your work as clerk magistrate?
Absolutely, yes.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Councilor DePaula. I would normally be next, and I don't have any questions for you. I can tell you that Councilor Hurley is a big fan of yours. I spoke with her. I had to take over the hearing because issues she had, and then we had the technical issues. I think she's coming back on. Mary, you back on?
I'm here, although no.
Oh, good. Mary, you're up. We're all done except for you.
Well, I want.
You can close out the hearing. You don't have to say anything.
So I figured I always
Mary,
had the
you're going
last
in
word,
and
Terry,
out.
you know that. Oh, darn.
Mary, we're having trouble. You're going in and out, so.
I think I did a great job. And hi.
All right, Mary, I'm putting you on speaker. Say what you want to say because we can't hear you on the Zoom. Go ahead.
I think you're a great candidate. You've got the support of this council from what I've heard. I'm sorry that my video and
Audio did not work, but
I think Terry did a great job. Thank you, Terry, and you did a great job as well.
Okay, you've been a great supporter of hers, Mary. And we're going to close the hearing because the LG is coming in now.
Very good. Thank you.
All right.
So much for your time.
call our assembly to order, and I recognize Councilor Ferrera for our prayer and pledge today.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Governor. I'm gonna pray for justice. Yeah, so while I was in one of 3 funerals I have this week, I felt like Councilor Devaney this week, going to 3 funerals, but I looked through the missal and I found this prayer, so it was pretty good. So we gather in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We pray for peace, we work for justice. Among cultures, nations, and all generations, we pray for peace and justice. Between faiths, denominations, and those who seek God, we pray for peace and justice. Among family, friends, and strangers alike, we pray for peace and justice. For those who are hungry, rejected, alone, we pray for peace and justice. To end violence, hatred, and misunderstanding, we pray for peace and justice. For a world torn by war and the threat of destruction, we pray for peace and justice. Thank you.
Allegiance to the
Allegiance to the flag.
The Republic.
This will.
Thank you, Councilor. I recognize Councilor Juvenile for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant.
So moved.
This is the warrant.
This is the warrant. There's a motion and a second.
Question on the warrant. If I could get an information back, there is a supplemental appropriation bill with the legislature requesting transferability language between several mass health appropriations to reduce the deficiency. So I'm voting on an explanation of that.
Sure. We can provide that to you right away. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I recognize Councilor Devaney for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public and justices of the peace.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I recognize Councilor Ianella for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Katie Cook Rayburn to the position of Associate Justice of the Superior Court.
Thank you so much.
Second. Thank you.
There's a motion and a second. We may begin the roll call.
Yes.
Councilor Ferrera?
Yes.
Councilor Juvenile?
Yes.
Councilor Devaney?
Yes.
Councilor Dodd?
Yes.
With pleasure, yes.
Thank you. I recognize Councilor Devaney for a motion to record advice and consent for the appointment of Sarah Wayland Ellis to the position of Associate Justice of the Superior Court. This would be Sarah Wayland Ellis, a motion to the position of Associate Justice of the Superior Court.
It's my pleasure. In all my years, I mean, what qualifications? I wish all the councils were here to hear. The letters, they were unbelievable, saying all the things she's done, all her accomplishments. She's on different boards. She's changed so many things. I'm just so pleased that the governor has brought her up. I wish we had more like her. Unbelievable. I never saw a resume like that. So I'm very proud to make that motion.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion. There is a second. We may begin the roll call.
Yes.
Councilor Juvenile?
Yes.
Councilor Devaney?
Yes.
Councilor Ianella?
Yes.
Councilor Dodd?
Yes.
Councilor Kennedy?
Pleasure, yes.
Thank you. We have new nominations. Colette M. Santa has been nominated for reappointment as a member of the Parole Board, and Councilor DiPaolo, that is within your district. Do you have a date?
I'm going to consult with the nominee and pick a date.
Okay, perfect. And William J.
Is there a date?
There's not a date yet. He's going to speak with the nominee and get back to all of us. William J. Galvin has been nominated to the position of Circuit Justice of the District Court. And that's within your district, Councilor.
Yes. The week after next, I don't believe we have anything.
Till next week.
The week after next, I don't believe we have anything.
You are correct.
So I'm going to put it on at 9 o'clock in the morning that Wednesday.
Very good. 9 o'clock. What's the date there, Lauren?
June 8th.
June 8th, 9 o'clock. William Galvin. Okay. That concludes our business today. Thank you very much. And eve of Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for observing in whatever way you choose to.
Is it June 1st? The week after next?
June 8th.
June 8th, right? Oh.
We have two next week.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Everybody can come
Good
in.
morning.
Public hearing, everybody's welcome.
Just let me know when you're ready to start the meeting, Terry.
Want me to start, Mary?
I was gonna run it, but if you want to do it, it's fine with me.
We're having a little trouble hearing you, Mary.
If we could hear her, she could do it. If we could see her.
Do you want me to start, Mary?
My computer is acting like
I'll
bizarre.
start it. We're gonna wait 2 more minutes because we told everybody 1:10.
Okay, that's what, Terry, if you do that, I'd appreciate it. Did you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear, Counselor.
Thank you.
Piece of cake.
All reappointments.
Great. Judges on the great one. Nice and easy.
It's our job. Can't do it.
All do. Governor, dated May 18, 2022, to the Executive Council. It says, I am pleased to nominate Catherine Watson Koziol for reappointment to the position of the Administrative Law Judge at the Department of Industrial Actions to a 6-year term expiring August 8, 2026. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Mass General Law 23E, Section 5. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker. Okay, I understand that the Chief Judge is here and he's going to be offering some testimony. Currently, we have in the room Councilor Duff. We have Councilor Ferrara and Councilor Devaney. The other councilors will be in momentarily. I'll introduce them when they come in. Judge Hernandez, I understand you're here to speak on behalf of all of the reappointments today.
That's correct.
And it would be really nice if we could wrap them all up into one speech.
I would do my best, and that was my intent. That was my intention, to do it all in one speech. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. We appreciate it.
I'm here, these 4 judges, I know always come up here, basically bragging about how great my judges are, and they are. But these 4 are truly the cream of the crop. They have, the last few years, given everything we've been through, have stepped up, whether it be mediations, pre-hearing conferences, pre-hearing memos, walk-in lump sums, whatever it has taken, they've stepped up and not only maintained it, but it's exceeded my expectations. I come here asking for the privilege being confirmed. I asked for your vote, and I could not speak more highly of all 4 candidates.
You're back 100% from the pandemic?
With in-person hearings, for hearings, we're in person. For conciliations and conferences, we're still virtual. We have not missed a beat. In fact, with conciliations, we've actually increased the resolution. We're now at 57% of cases resolved at conciliation. With respect to...
Can you think of any reason why you do away with the Zoom hearings on conciliations and things like that?
At this moment, not at all. In respect with conferences, we're actually... In 2019, before the pandemic, we had 11,700 continuances. In 2021, we were down to 5,700. So we literally cut continuances in half because the virtual is there. They have assigned time, so there's less continuances, and people don't have to travel as much. So they're not getting stuck in traffic, conflicts in different regions. So it's been working fine. So whatever they can do in the courtroom has translated to the virtual platform. So again, I can't be more proud of our judges. And I said, these 4 in these rooms. No disrespect to Judge Long.
Judge, I'll give you 1 second. And Judge, we all agree that you're doing a fantastic job. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Counselor Devaney?
Thank you. You got the best boss in the world. First of all, I want to tell you, I've been here 23 years. And I always it's like a report card for the Industrial Action Board. But because they came so fast, they just got nominated, 7 days ago. And so it probably isn't a possibility, but this is the first time I don't have those. And I was really concerned about that. But it's not your fault, it's the council's fault.
And I can speak with respect to their ACEs. They're all highly effective. I've reviewed them personally. I draft them, and all 4 of them.
No, I understand. But you know what I loved about it, that it said any discrimination or prejudice.
There hasn't been.
No, but I'm saying I could look at it.
Right.
I was looking at the district court, superior court, I love it.
I'll be more than happy to send them to you. I can assure you that there is no bias, any discrimination, anything on behalf of these 4 judges.
I'm just saying that that's what I missed, but when the council scheduled all in one day like that, it's an impossibility for you to give us that. Take your time, I don't need it tomorrow, but I do like to see it, it's great.
And I know they came up quickly, but they have been overdue for a while, so they were anxious to get case moving.
Does anybody else have any questions for Chief Judge Hernandez?
Same here. Thank you.
Omar Hernandez.
Appreciate it.
We just speak right now on behalf of all 4.
Yeah.
Spoke on all 4 at once. Great.
They're all great.
They really are. No, yes.
We all rely on Counsel Iannella for workers' comp expertise.
As well as you should, yes.
Because none of us really practice up there. Okay, thank you, Chief Judge. Okay, and we're going to get to the nominee. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Catherine Watson Koziol. I'm an administrative law judge at the Department of Industrial Accidents, as you know. I've been at the department for a total of 17 years. My first 3 years, I was an administrative judge in the Worcester Regional Office, where I sat and I conducted hearings and conferences, the things that Judge Hernandez has just been talking about. For the last 14 years, I've been an administrative law judge on the reviewing board. I actually brought my colleague, administrative law judge Martin. But he's not speaking, he's just.
He's learned well.
He doesn't get.
We'll hear from Judge Long in a moment.
Opportunities.
As soon as you're finished, we're going to let him pop up because we are.
Very good. Well, anyways, I am from West Springfield, Massachusetts. I went to the public schools there. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. My dad was a railroad engineer and my mom was a dietitian. Went to physical therapy school because who knows what they want to do when they're 18. I didn't, but my mother said, get a profession. So I went to Northeastern. I have a bachelor's of science in physical therapy, worked in physical therapy 5 years, liked it, didn't love it. Series of events happened and people kept telling me you should go to law school. I didn't know any lawyers. Nobody in my family's a lawyer. I never knew any lawyers. I took the LSAT and I went to Boston University School of Law and absolutely loved it and have never looked back. I had the really good fortune of getting to work at Pellegrini and Sealy in Springfield, Mass. And they hired me as a clerk when I was still in law school. And then they hired me as an attorney and they taught me what I know about workers' comp. And from there, I worked for Associate Justice Kent B. Smith of the Massachusetts Appeals Court, and he's extremely well known. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but he was extremely well known for criminal procedure. He wrote the mass practice series, and he's the one who actually got me into writing mass practice for workers' comp. But he was like my mentor. My dad died when I was 15, but Judge Smith took me under his wing, and he was always telling me, what are you doing next, kid? What are you doing next, kid? So the next thing I was a staff attorney. Then he said to me, okay, you've been a staff attorney 8 years. It's time to move on. Why don't you apply for one of these DIA judgeships? And I did, and I really liked it. But I really loved appellate work. And so when the opportunity opened up, I applied. And as an administrative law judge, we sit on 3 judge panels to hear appeals from the decisions the judges make. So that's our primary difference in our job description, because after us, if you appeal from our decision, you go to the appeals court. There's no review in the Superior Court. So it's a little bit different procedurally how you get up to the appeals court, but we're the intermediate. And I love it because I think people need to have certainty they can, so that they can make decisions on whether they should settle their case, whether they shouldn't settle their case, whether they should challenge what we write. And I think it helps because when you're an AJ, you can have a really great, exciting case and write a beautiful decision, but nobody else sees it. And if the parties don't appeal, maybe the issue never gets percolated up. So I feel it's very important work and I enjoy it. And I would just ask if you would kindly vote in my favor.
Excellent statement. We're gonna let Judge Long pop up for a minute since I messed up the hearing. Again.
All right.
Come on, step up. It's good to see you again, Judge.
Nice to see you, Counselor.
You're coming up in December, right?
From what I understand, hopefully.
Yeah, well, I hope so.
Let's see how he does.
Yeah, let's see how he does today.
So, councilors, it's an honor and a privilege really to be here to speak on behalf of the reappointment of Judge Koziol. The past 5.5 years, I've been working alongside closely in person, and the last couple of years remotely. And it's based on that experience that I would suggest to you that everybody in this room, all the stakeholders in the workers' comp system will benefit by her reappointment. Not only because of her temperament, her compassion, her understanding of the law. She literally does write the book on workers' compensation. So to have Judge Koziol as a resource at the Department of Industrial Accidents is invaluable. And we are all lucky to have her put her name in to be nominated. I know that a lot of people are concerned about judicial temperament and how does the judge act. I cannot say anything but give the highest praise for Judge Koziol's judicial temperament. Not only does she give litigants and their lawyers the utmost respect, but I think what has driven it home for me is before I became a judge, I would deal with pro se litigants every once in a while. I never really understood or saw how it worked from behind the scenes at the reviewing board. What I've seen Judge Koziol do with her pro se litigants is treat them as if they were the highest paid lawyer from a Boston or a Springfield or any firm.
Counselor Iannello up again there?
I would put him up there, yes. But this is what I'm saying. The way that she treats the pro se litigants and the litigants that do not have attorneys, I think speaks volumes. She gives them the resources, the opportunity. She directs them to exactly where they should be, where they should go. And it's that type of an attitude that I think speaks to her professionalism and just also to her as a person. So again, I would give the utmost support.
Thank you, Judge. And hang around, we might want to have some questions for you. How many times you had to overturn our other nominees? Councilor Juvenile.
I'll tell you right now, none.
So where do you sit?
In Boston.
Okay, is that where you both sit?
We both sit in Boston, yes, but with the virtual, a lot of the stuff we're doing is virtual, but.
And do you say she's got a good temperament?
Absolutely.
You ever see her lose her temper?
I don't think I ever have.
Been looking for a woman like that all my life.
This guy found her. This guy found her.
Thank you, Councilor Juvenile. Thank you, Judge. So is there anybody in opposition? Okay, Councilor Ferrara, you're up.
Thank you. I have no questions. Excuse me, I'm not done.
No questions.
No question, but I have a comment.
That's just
Get a half-hour statement to
Yeah.
get the timer ready, 15 minutes.
I have 14 more minutes. I don't do comp work at all, ever. But I do rely on Council Iannello. Sean Flaherty also reached out to me and Mike Occasion as well. And they're big fans of all four of you. So you do a great job in making sure that injured workers are treated fairly and properly. So I appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you.
Councilor Juvenile.
Don't do workman's comp or workers' comp either. I count on Councilor Iannello and to give me the recommendation, and they're thumbs up with you, so you're fine with me.
Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Thank you for coming a distance. The council scheduled 6 hearings today. And we have people Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And I'm really grateful for the people who take from their weekend to meet with me, because I want to know the whole person. I already know you, and I know the people, but I want to know what's happened on the board and have it changed and all of that. I was very impressed with you, your writing, and what could be more apropos of this conversation? You wrote a book about that, right? It's about how you did that and how.
Well, it's not like I'm a prosaic writer. It's technical writing, so I'm okay at that. I never got a literary award to try. It's really giving synopsises of what a case is held and what it means for. It's a practice manual for lawyers when they have a case, like what is the law, and to judges in training. You know, the district court judges, the superior court judges, they do training every year, and the Flashner Judicial Institute runs their trainings and provides them with those books. So that was like a year in that. And so I assisted him. You know, he was the author, I'm just the co-author, so I assisted him in the preparation of that.
I don't know whether this is apropos, but when you look at, when is the first time you came before me? 18?
2000, it must have been 2005, at the beginning of 2005, because I started in April of 2005.
Well, you've done a great job, and I've heard good things about you. And believe me, I hear there isn't, and I'm so pleased with the whole board now. You know, I couldn't say enough about it. So tell me, I don't know whether this is appropriate, but is there, you know, one disabled person that came before you, that you had a case that you will stand out in my memory, that was so significant, maybe it was so rewarding?
One that I, as a judge, that I had as a judge. There's a lot of them, so it's really hard to say because there's a lot of them for a lot of different reasons. And I think the one that was really the saddest one I saw was this man that they thought that he was dangerous. He was in so much pain that he was just like really difficult. And I felt bad for the man because we ended up having a state police officer at the department, and it really wasn't. It wasn't a case of him being a violent person. He had complex regional pain syndrome so bad that he showed up in my courtroom in January. This was back in Worcester in a t-shirt. January in Worcester is not t-shirt weather, but he couldn't stand having anything touch his skin on his arm. And that was a heartbreaker. But you know, I hadn't seen him before that date. And it was actually one of the other judges that had the case before me. So I didn't know what his situation was. And I was getting information from an attorney who was like, he's threatened me. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, then you go through the senior judge and they all agree to have a police officer there. But in the end, I felt he really was a threat to him, which was just very sad, very sad.
You have had so many in all these years. Do you ever follow up with any of them or hear how they did at, you know, coming before you disabled and what their future was? Do you ever find that out?
Not really, unless an attorney tells you what they're doing now. I had one back in the day when I worked at Pellegrini and Saley, and he was a young man who'd been run over, like he operated a pipe bending machine. And he was actually my client, and they took the pipes from the bottom of the pile and they all rolled over on him, 3,500 pounds of pipes on him. And he couldn't go back to construction work. And he ended up putting himself, you know, with the help of Oak Rehab, putting himself through Hoyo Community College. And he's extremely successful right now. So every once in a while, he'll call me up and he'll say, hey, guess what I'm doing now? And it's usually a new business venture or something. So that's really nice. Yeah.
Well, I'm very happy that you stayed, you're up for reappointment, and I love the board, I love your boss, and it's a nice feeling. It really is nice to have you. And I really enjoyed meeting with you and catching up on the years that you've been on there. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
You, Councilor Iannelli.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. He's done a great job. But for that matter, the whole bunch was excellent. The whole bunch, all four of them were excellent. I I didn't meet with any of them like I did the first two because these people get rave reviews from the employee bar, whether you're representing an employer or employee. These people are all fair. They give everyone a fair shot. That's all anybody ever wants. And you got the best supporter in town, the Chief Judge, Maher, looking forward to supporting you next week.
Thank you.
So Duff.
I concur with Council Ianella, who's actually the only one of us who is an expert in your field here. But there's no reason to prolong these hearings for nonsense. You're eminently qualified, you're doing a terrific job, you have great reviews, so I have no questions.
Mr. Paula.
I hear you do a great job, same as everyone else, except Councilor I know I don't do this practice area, but a few phone calls with these reappointments. And as long as the board is looking out for injured workers and the attorneys and the colleagues have positive things to say, I feel good too. So I look forward to supporting you this week.
Councilor Hurley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
You're up.
I am very pleased and honored to be able to put your name in nomination next week. Your resume is absolutely fabulous, Judge Koziol, and I would also indicate that obviously you got an A+ rating from Pellegrini Sealy and also from some of the folks in Boston that I checked with. So I'm sure that you're going to, from what everybody said, you will be voted on favorably, and keep doing the great job you've been doing. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Juvenile, did you have another comment? Okay, we're done. Next.
Okay. May 18, 2022, Executive Council, Council Chamber, State House, Boston, Mass. Dear councilors, I'm pleased to nominate John J. Barrett III for reappointment to the position of Administrative Judge at the Department of Industrial Accidents to a 6-year term expiring on January 6, 2027. I submit the nomination for the advice and consider Executive Council pursuant to Mass General Laws 23E, Section 5. I'm enclosing the resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker. What do we got? We got a witness?
Judge.
Yes. Judge. Sure.
You're from him.
We'll take that as a yes vote.
A thumbs up?
Okay. Tell us briefly, we work under the law of brevity. Here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is John Barrett. I'd like to thank you all for having me in today to be interviewed for the nomination for reappointment to the position of Administrative Judge. I'd like to also thank Governor Baker for nominating me to serve in this position. I'm truly honored and humbled to appear before you today. Way of brief background, I'm 53 years old. I was born in Boston and was raised in Rentham, Massachusetts. My mother, a registered nurse for 50 years, just retired, worked at Metro West Medical Center in the Labor and Delivery Department. My father was a police officer and detective, and he passed away back in 1999 from lung cancer. I have a younger brother and 4 younger sisters. I've been very fortunate in my career. I just want to say that right up front. I've served 2 communities as a police officer early on in my career, and I've worked for 3 well-respected law firms as a trial attorney focusing on workers' compensation and general liability cases. For the last 7 years, I've served as an administrative judge, and it's been a privilege of a lifetime to do that. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with the parties and counsel from initial conference to the hearing stage. I've also managed more than 200 mediations in regular workers' comp cases, and also served as the mediating judge in the opioid diversion program. I'm committed to public service, and I respect the system, respect everybody involved in the system, and I'd be honored, and it would be a privilege to be able to serve for another 6 years.
Let me ask you, where were you a police officer?
I was a police officer first in Rentham, and I transferred to the transit police in Boston, where I served for 4 years.
Oh, good for you, yeah. And your father was a detective where?
In Rentham for 25 years.
Westwood?
Rentham?
Rentham.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Councilor Devaney, you're up.
Thank you for meeting with me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I can't believe that, I had you on a weekend to come out on a Saturday and Sunday. So I thank you for that. You've had hundreds of cases. Now, tell me, in mediation, so that people out there will understand what you do when you mediate, you served on the opioid committee. Tell us about that particular mediation.
Well, the opioid program, it's a diversion program where it's generally now used in cases where the employee has settled their workers' compensation case. And it comes into the system in a couple of ways. Either the employee petitions to come into the system, or the insurance company files a petition to have the case tracked into the diversion program. And what it is basically, if the case is in the program, we meet with the employee's attorney and the defense attorney, and we discuss what's going on, and usually the employee is struggling with opioid medication long-term, and they're not happy with their lives and how things are going. And what we do is we develop a plan with a care coordinator to work with the treating doctors to come up with a plan to either completely switch somebody from opioid medication onto something else, or more likely reduce the employee's use of or dose level of opioid medication. And we've had a great deal of success, I think, with that program over the years, and I'm proud of it and proud to be a part of it.
Now, how long has this been, the alternative treatment pathway? When did that start?
It started before I became a judge. Judge Hernandez developed it with others, and it was in place before I got here. But I've enjoyed being a part of it, and it's been just a privilege to help.
But it's a sign of the times, isn't it? There must be a lot of workers.
I think it is. I think there's some talk about actually expanding the program to people who are actually still receiving benefits, not just to people who have settled their cases.
There you go, Mark, for starting that. That's wonderful. So how many people do you think have gone through that program in those years?
I don't know the stats. Omar can probably tell you, but I've handled.
Say probably.
Wonderful. They can go all their lives. Yeah, that's great. So it's been hard through the pandemic, but you've continued. How do you evaluate someone before you who you're not looking in his eyes or her eyes, and I don't know whether you have it on a screen or whatever? How have you been operating?
Well, we have the conference level that we're involved in is virtual. And at that level, generally the employees don't testify at all at that level. We meet with the attorneys and the employees present, but when we're making evaluations of credibility and me actually doing a trial, that's in person. So we're in the room with that person, see them come in, or any witnesses that come in, testify live. So that's how we make evaluations of credibility.
And you've done training to plaintiff justice and all of that.
Yes, I have.
Realize what part of your duties are. It really is amazing.
I did that when I was practicing. We would talk with adjusters and help them understand the system and what's important.
But that prepares you for industrial accident board.
I think so.
No, I'm very pleased. And I have to tell something publicly that I said privately to you. When I was about 10 years old, I used to take piano lessons, and Miss Manning, and her nephew lived with her. And he used to walk down the stairs all the time never came in the room with where the piano was. I thought he was the most handsome man in the world, and I had the maddest crush at 10 years old on John Barrett. So when I saw that name, I said, oh my God. I embarrassed him. He doesn't know whether he's related. But anyway, yeah, that's my John Barrett story. But really, I'm so pleased with what you've done, and I can't imagine how hard it is. Now, has it increased since you've been on, the number of people coming?
Claims? You know, I don't know that it's increased. I don't know the stats. We've been busy since I started. We've been very busy, but I don't know the numbers, whether they were less before I came on board or whether they've gone up. But we've been steady, I think. Yeah.
Well, we talked a lot, and I just was just a pleasure to meet up with you again and to see you're being reappointed and that you're staying with it, because I can't say enough about the board. You know, everybody's working together, and everyone has, all of you, and you each have such respect for each other, and that's so important, you know. And so, so thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, no.
Thank you for coming out this Sunday to meet with me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I have no questions. Familiar with you, your work. Same thing I said with Judge Koziol. You're fair, you're compassionate, you do everyone in shape. That's all I'm looking for. It's good work.
Thank you, Counselor.
Counselor Duff.
No questions.
Counselor Kennedy.
I'm just gonna say it again, we rely on Chris, Counselor Ionella. And he says you do a fantastic job up there. Your reputation is great. I'll vote for you.
Thank you very much.
Same, and I would just note that of the reappointments today, it's great to see folks who have different careers besides just in the legal world, both perspective as an employee who's not a lawyer, and on top of it, having worked with the broader population in different ways. So I have no questions for you.
I concur with my colleagues, as I said earlier. I don't do it. I rely on Counselor Ionella. And good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Was the chief in the BTA when you were there?
The first chief was a Boston lieutenant who was there for about a month, and then it was
Braden.
No, he had just left. Braden was there before I got there. It was I forget his name. Was Ball. I forget his name, but it was O'Donovan.
John O'Donovan.
Yeah, he was there most of the time I was there. Yeah. Good guy.
Council Juvenile?
Pardon?
Council. Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
No problem. Mr. Barrett, we talked for a little bit, and as I told you, I rely on Pellegrini Sealy. They give you an A+ rating, as well as some of the folks out of Boston. So I'm going to vote for you and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Like the other counselors, I rely on Counselor Ionella and the chief, and they both give you the thumbs up, so I'll be voting for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate all your time.
Thanks. On 22, Executive Council, Council Chamber, State House, Boston, Mass. Dear Councilors, I'm pleased to nominate Karen A. Fitzgerald for reappointment to the position of Administrative Judge at the Department of Industrial Accidents to a 6-year term, expiring on January 6, 2027. Hopefully, we'll all be here at that time. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 23E, Section 5. I'm closing the resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker, Governor. With that, Councilor Devaney, you're up. You can sit or stand. Oh, I'm sorry. We got to give you a chance.
Hey.
You should waive it.
I'll waive it.
Okay, Councilor Devaney.
That was easy.
Councilor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you as well.
That was such a pleasure to meet with you, honestly. And it was fun too. I have to say, you know what I'd like you to do? We're on public access, which I love. And I want, people don't know the difference between an administrative law judge or an administrative judge. So would you tell people in the public what the difference is of your, your position and your responsibilities?
Sure. So it is my position as an administrative judge to hear conferences, issue temporary orders, and then do full evidentiary hearings. We also do mediations, which because of the pandemic, we've been doing a lot more of. The administrative law judge is there as a review board so that any parties that are dissatisfied with the decision, the hearing decision that we write, will take it to them for review.
I see. So this has been a difficult year, hasn't it, in the pandemic?
It has.
But you people have continued and you haven't skipped a beat.
We have.
Absolutely, wonderful. So these injured workers, have they increased since you've been on, or does it stay the same? Is there any reason to how many come in?
Like Judge Barrett said, I don't know what the statistics are with respect to that, but I can tell you I have still continued working nonstop and been busy, so I don't know if it's the same, a little bit less, a little bit more. I'm not certain of that.
But, you know, you have worked in law offices, which means a lot to me. I think you bring a lot to the bench with that. And can you tell us some of the experience you've had in law firms related to workman's compensation and the work that you do now?
So for 23 years prior to assuming the bench, I represented employees for the most part. I did dabble a little in insurer defense, but the bulk of my practice was employees. I worked in a couple of law firms before I became self-employed and was working with my dad, fortunately for me, for 15 years prior to coming on the bench. My dad had practiced workers' comp for over 50 years, so I couldn't really ask for a better mentor. And so, you know, each case is different. You handle each case differently. Prepare as best you can.
In talking with you, I saw the influence your dad had. What a wonderful opportunity you had to go to him and ask questions and learn from him.
It was wonderful. And I was fortunate enough to start when there were people like Judge Maher who were working for Liberty Mutual and were kind to the new attorneys and you know, helped us out. So I've been very fortunate.
Well, he must be very proud that you followed in his footsteps. So what do you think is the biggest challenge on the Industrial Accident Board? Is there a challenge?
It's hard to say if there's a challenge because I think the challenge that we've faced has been the pandemic. And I think with Judge Hernandez's guidance and direction, we have stayed open. We have continued. We have not skipped a beat, whether we started first with, you know, conference calls on the phone and hearing cases to then going virtual. I feel that we haven't skipped a beat. And I think the pandemic really would have been a tipping point. And
are you still virtual?
We're virtual for conferences. We are live for hearings. We are probably 95% virtual for mediations. If there's a special circumstance and we're asked to come in to do a mediation, we will do that as well.
Right, right. Well, thank you for reapplying and I thank you for all, you know, your time on the board. I thank you for coming out and meeting with me because it was a marathon.
Thank you.
Counselor Ainella.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions. I mean, Judge, you got a great bunch of it.
I'm very lucky.
I just have one question more towards the judge as I'm sitting here.
That's not my fault. I know, not my fault. That's Sean, Dr. Sean. Jeez.
But again, good seeing you.
Thank you as well.
Looking forward to supporting you.
Thank you.
It's enough.
No questions, thank you.
Kennedy. Counselor DePaulo.
I have no question.
No question. Okay, sorry, Counselor Ferraro. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, Counselor Hurley.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. Again, great resume. Only question is, James F. Fitzgerald Jr., is that a relative?
That was my dad.
Okay. I practiced law with my dad, which is always a great experience. Again, you've got a great resume, and I'm going to be voting for you. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Counselor.
Mr. Ferrera.
Thank you. Once again, I did ask other attorneys, including Counsel, I don't know about you, thinks you're awesome, and I remember Sean Flaherty saying you are outstanding. So you have my support this week.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think you got a great resume, and I really am glad you had a chance to work with your dad all those years. And Councilor Ryanella and Chief Fernandez give you the thumbs up, so you'll be getting my vote next week.
Thank you very much.
Meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Are we having the hearing on Dennis Maher?
And I'll quickly read into the record a letter from Governor Baker. I am pleased to nominate Dennis M. Maher for reappointment to the position of Administrative Judge, Department of Industrial Accidents, to a 6-year term expiring September 15th, 2026. I submit this nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 23E, Section 5, I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker. And with that, I heard whispering before this hearing was called to order that you're waiving your statement. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And are there any witnesses to speak on your behalf?
Judge
Hernandez.
Which we heard from. So I'll start with Counselor Hurley. Do you have any questions for the nominee?
No, I don't have any questions. And again, I'm with Pellegrini Sealy. I also have the expertise of our fellow Counselor Iannella. And I think you've done a great job from all I've heard, and you'll continue to do a great job with your reappointment. So thank you very much.
You have many pieces of the Pellegrini and Sealy group out of Woodford. They do an excellent job. Their clients couldn't be any better represented.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Counselor Ferreira.
Thank you. I'll just reiterate that, again, Counsel Iannella, Sean Flaherty, and Michael Occasion reached out to me on your behalf, and they all think you do a great job, so you have my support next week. Thank you.
Counselor Juvenile.
Same with me. How long you been on the board now?
18.
No, 13 and a half.
13 and a half. Well, you've done a wonderful job, and Councilor Ryanella and your chief give you a big, good rating, so that's fine with me. I'm going to vote for you next week.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Counselor Devaney.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you too.
I'm going to pronounce your name the Irish way, Maher, right? Okay. And I just wanted to say that, 14 years, have you seen any changes in the way the board works or the people coming through? Change at all?
Well, I think obviously with the pandemic, things changed a lot. I mean, we've got the virtual conferences now. I know the conciliations are virtual. Hearings are, it's a little bit different. They were wearing masks for a while. That was troubling, what people giving testimony, but that's been the biggest change. The type of work people do is changing a little bit too. We don't have some of the manufacturing type jobs that once upon a time we did, but we have a lot of other type of.
Have you seen in the 14 years that injured workers, disabled, have drug addictions? Has that increased in the 14 years?
Well, actually, it kind of peaked. Judge Barrett was talking about the opioid alternative treatment path, but I think opioids were such a big out for painkillers for most of the doctors, and patients got them. They reduced their pain. They wanted to have them, and then they just stayed with it. And I think addiction was a major problem. I think, as we've all seen in the newspapers, on TV, and everything else, that it was a really big problem. And speaking towards the opioid alternative treatment program. It was Judge Hernandez who started it and got it rolling. And one of the things I've seen over the years with that is because of all the publicity about the companies with their addiction plan to get people hooked, that people are starting to realize that they have to be off it. So in terms of getting people off opioids, it's really gotten to be a lot easier from our perspective because they want to be off it.
Well, you know, I think that Hernandez should see that this was a sign of the time for the opiate, you know. And now, are they involved with the drug courts, or you can handle it right there with that opiate?
No, we don't get no criminal or drug courts at all.
Yeah.
Very little.
No, I think that's wonderful. So you've been working through the pandemic. Have you found anything different in the pandemic regarding getting your work or your workload?
I think the workload's kind of stayed the same. I think, once again, Judge Hernandez, I know he said something nice about me, so I'm going to work on saying things nice about him. But he kept the place open. It was really important to do that. I mean, even the trial courts were shut down, but we were still doing virtual conferences, all our motion sessions, all our pre-hearing, our pre-trial conferences, I guess we call them. They're all virtual. We get them done. They move along. Cases are moving. Our backlogs are really reducing.
Well, you told me one advantage to the pandemic was that you could expand the print and everything.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the medical records, it's a lot easier. And it's a lot easier if you saw me read my opening in big print. It's much easier to read when you can blow them up.
So there was an advantage.
A big advantage to that. And
Listen,
Hernandez talked about the idea of.
Thank you for serving for 14 years and you're working with a great group. And thank you again. And I'm so pleased that the four of you have been reappointed, rightfully so. And I just have to tell you that we have one lawyer here that is an expert in this, so I know that he's very happy with the four too, Councilor Ainella.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Ainella.
Yeah, same as the others. I mean, Judge Marston, I can't say enough. He's just great. Same type of sentiments as the last debate. Great. Wish you all the best. I'm more than happy to support you in your income before it comes.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Duff.
Thank you, Judge. You were actually one that I did receive calls about. Your reputation is stellar, and you certainly deserve it. So
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kennedy.
I sound like a broken record, you know, in terms of relying on Chris Iannella because, you know, he's the one we go to. Also, I neglect to say John and you know, we're all four of us. I got great things to say. I'm not that good at math, but I think you said you were on 14 and a half years?
It was 13 and a half.
13 and a half, and how long is this appointment for?
This is, well, it'd be 4.5, right?
So
4.5 more years.
So using my math, you need one more term anyway, right? You're gonna be back here in a few years to get that little bump at the end when you retire, right?
Maybe we'll see about, I have an appointment with Cody or something before that, so we'll see.
We'll see what Iannella says about you in 4.5 years and then decide.
Yes.
All set. I'll vote for you next week.
Thank you, Councilor. The only thing I'll add to what's been said here is I think you have a great background. I spoke of this at the last hearing. It's great to see folks who have had career experience outside of the law. You have great community involvement. And I heard the highest possible praise from Michael Occasion, which I think I mentioned to you when we spoke. So with that, I have no questions for you, but I do look forward to putting your name forward and supporting your reappointment at our next assembly.
Thank you very much.
And with that, this hearing is closed.